It all begins on a battlefield, where the MC crawls across the ground, badly wounded, swearing he will eliminate his adversary. Even surrounded by corpses and completely drained of strength, he tries to muster what little power he has left for the sole purpose of finishing off his enemy. The enemy simply lets out a mocking laugh, showing not even a shred of fear in that situation. Watching the man collapse, the mage notes that our MC is somehow still holding on to his last breath despite his injuries. The one on the ground is the master swordsman Chrono Gaius, and he is barely able to stay conscious. Certain that this is a pathetic sight, the mage warns that Chrono's body can no longer refine mana and tells him to stop fighting in vain. As he turns his back, he sneers that the famous warrior's level was only the 7th grade, making it clear that his own power is vastly superior. However, Chrono pushes himself up, warning that none of that truly matters. Chrono tells the enemy he can have the world and all the fame for himself, but there is one thing he needs to know. Looking toward his wife, our MC becomes absolutely furious, and he demands to know what the villain did to her to leave her in that state. In that moment, a memory flashes, showing Chrono standing before the woman he loves so dearly. Prepared to head out on a journey, he calmly says his goodbyes to her. His wife wishes her husband a safe trip, showing all of her affection. With that, the swordsman simply nods gently, never imagining that this peace would be destroyed. Back in the present, our MC's wife looks completely lost and out of it. The mage, without a single shred of pity, reveals that he simply used his mana to turn her into an undead thrall, leaving the hero in shock. The villain takes advantage of his opponent's fragility to ask if he understands the reasons why he lost both the battle and his wife. Unable to form a response, Chrono grinds his teeth while dealing with the frustration and hate boiling inside. Realizing the silence, the mage decides to provide the answer and orders the swordsman to look carefully at everything around him, and then makes it clear that mana is everything in this world, ensuring that the strongest take everything for themselves while the weak lose absolutely everything. Faced with this harsh reality, the hero bows his head, feeling the weight of those words, completely unable to retort. Memories of his subordinates calling him captain start to blend with the terrible images of them transformed into zombies. The painful memory shows his companions believing in world peace, only to have their bodies corrupted soon after. Seeing the cruel fate they all suffered, the MC curses the situation, consumed by despair. Ignoring the man's suffering, the enemy comments that there are 2 things in this world he finds very interesting. Observing the warrior collapsed at his feet, he reveals that the first is finding someone who is absolutely strong. Keeping the suspense in the air, he prepares to tell him what his second great interest is. Preparing purple magic in his hands, he explains that the best feeling is the exact moment when the heart of that strong person breaks into pieces. Without wasting time, he fires the spell, trapping Chrono in magical chains that make him scream in pain. Consumed by the immense agony, he only groans while trying to resist the attack of the magical chains. The mage warns that he has sealed the warrior's mana for all eternity, ensuring that he can never again refine that energy. Floating triumphantly, he decrees that all the power and the reputation built by the master swordsman will end there along with his life. To make matters worse, the villain grabs the head of the undead wife and orders the hero to watch everything very carefully. Raising his sword, he demands that his opponent be a witness to his own helplessness in the face of that scene. Without hesitation, the wretch plunges the blade into the woman while Chrono screams in desperation, begging him to stop. With a tone of pure irony, the mage asks why the warrior doesn't get up to save his beloved. While the MC rides in hatred on the ground, the enemy continues to provoke him to show off his oh-so-proud power. Trapped in that situation, the swordsman deeply laments not having the strength to stop the tragedy happening right in front of him. Totally destroyed, he mourns not being able to do anything. In the midst of his despair, he mutters quietly, noticing that his once valuable mana is no longer there. Grabbing the dirt firmly, he warns that he doesn't care about that anymore, focusing only on his true goal. Driven by pure fury, the hero forces his muscles to their limit and swears he will kill the mage no matter what. Unfazed, the villain faces the opponent's resistance and mocks him, saying that ugly face won't be smiling for much longer. Projecting a scene of brutal torture in his mind, Chrono promises that one day he will rip the enemy's throat out and destroy his body without mercy. Showing all his determination, he vows that he will kill his adversary even if there is absolutely nothing left of his own being. Without losing his calm posture, the mage warns that he will grant the warrior's death wish. And he lands a strike right across our MC's neck. Then his body collapses to the ground. With that, Chrono no longer has the strength to do anything at all. Grabbing our MC's mouth, the mage warns that Chrono no longer has the right to even speak. The villain introduces himself as Gilgran O'Proud, and orders the warrior to tell stories about his strength when he reaches the underworld. On the verge of death, the swordsman swears he will kill Gilgran, refusing to accept such a miserable end. Suddenly, the scene shifts completely, with Chrono waking up in an unknown space, confused. An entity appears, surprised that he, even on the verge of death, can only think about the will to kill a certain person, and comments that it loves the level of malice exuded by the warrior. Completely lost in that strange place, he asks aloud what on earth is in front of him. Scared by the creature's appearance, Chrono asks if he is standing before a demon or some type of monster. The entity comments on how he burned through all his mana to become a master swordsman, only to be defeated by Gilgran with such ease. The shadow being then asks Chrono directly if he feels any regret for his choices. Noticing the warrior's thirst for vengeance, the creature offers him a golden opportunity to fulfill his wish. With a frightening smile on its face, it warns that it will give him temporary life and power, in addition to creating a loophole in the mana seal that was placed on him. Surprised by the proposal, the hero asks what the shadow means by that and what kind of life and power those are. Straight to the point, the entity explains that his new body will be able to release a gigantic power for only 3 minutes, and orders the warrior to plunge his sword into Gilgran's heart. But Chrono wants to understand what is happening and fills the creature with questions about how it knows about the villain and what it wants him to do. The being just points out that the faint light the swordsman gained in a life of killing was brutally crushed. Imposing its desire, the creature makes it clear that someone who has lost everything has no right to choose and orders him to kill the Necromancer for the soul of his beloved. Soon after, the view shifts, showing a pile of bodies on the ground of what appears to be the same battlefield. Sitting amidst the massacre, he breathes with difficulty while trying to understand how that place is identical to the moment of his death. Looking at his own hands, the hero lets out a groan of shock, wondering if he has truly returned to life. Noticing the major change, he panics, realizing he is trapped in the body of a child, and asks what the heck that is. The memory of the shadow creature promising the opportunity comes back strongly to his mind, leaving the MC apprehensive. In silence and with his head down, he mentally curses the one responsible for putting him in that situation. Analyzing the hands of that new body, he tries to assimilate the information and the fact that he has returned. He then realizes that he cannot use even a drop of his mana. Frustrated with the discovery, the boy tries to process what kind of miraculous opportunity that was, being completely devoid of energy. But his thoughts are interrupted when 2 enemy soldiers approach across the field of bodies and notice his presence there. Soon after, one of the men advances with his weapon in hand, realizing that the survivor is just an ordinary child. Without showing the slightest compassion, his partner in arms remembers the clear orders to eliminate everyone without sparing a soul. Then the soldier reinforces that this merciless slaughter is a direct directive from Lord Gilgran. Just hearing the name of his great enemy makes the MC's blood boil with hatred instantly. Totally focused on the kill, the man raises his sword and says his goodbyes, ready to execute the boy right there. However, in a quick and lethal movement, Chrono dodges the attack, slicing the enemy's body before the blade can reach him. Faced with that unusual scene, the other soldier praises the child's offensive stance but warns that it won't be enough. The swordsman himself recognizes the disadvantage of the situation, noting that his tiny body cannot handle intense combat. He realizes the great weight of the problem, since those childish muscles don't even have the brute force to hold the weapon properly. Taking advantage of the boy's clear exhaustion, the soldier mocks him, guaranteeing that good moves are useless without real impact. With an extremely arrogant tone, the warrior repeats the old twisted philosophy that being weak is an unforgivable sin. Hearing that same phrase makes the hero remember his wife's tragic fate, awakening an uncontrollable bloodlust. The memory of Gilgran's cruel words echoes strongly, reminding him that the inferior lose absolutely everything. Boiling with fury, Chrono agrees that the amount of mana does matter because he will kill the Necromancer anyway. Then an immense and blinding pillar of golden energy explodes directly from the boy's body, sweeping the field. He observes glowing magical chains manifesting around him, still trying to understand the sudden surge of power. It is clear that the shadow entity fulfilled its part of the deal, as the old energy seal begins to give way. Pressed by the brute force, the bindings shatter completely and open the way for the flow of magic. The enemy soldier tries to see through the dense cloud of dust raised, stunned by the sudden impact. As the smoke clears, the hero reveals himself intact and wrapped in a colossal golden aura. Analyzing his own hands, the MC is awestruck by the absurd amount of power he has just received. The enemy panics, realizing that the mana exuded by that simple child already surpasses the 5th magical level. Even faced with such strength, the 2 warriors advance, enraged, and swear they will massacre the boy. However, Chrono remains calm, and then casts a sharp and implacable gaze in their direction. Without mercy, the MC launches a strike toward them. The force of the blow is so terrifying that it rips the mountain and the earth in half, leaving an immense canyon in its path. Standing in the middle of the destruction, Chrono admits that he doesn't understand anything that happened, but he doesn't give a hoot about that either. With this new power pulsing, the hero swears he will kill Gilgran, even knowing he should be dead right now. He remembers the encounter with the shadow creature, which perceived his thirst for vengeance and offered a unique opportunity. The promise echoes in his mind, reminding him that he received temporary life and magic just to plunge the blade into the mage's heart. Brought back to life for this sole purpose, the swordsman is surprised by an enemy who advances, screaming in rage. Without the slightest difficulty, the boy delivers a quick and lethal strike that cuts through two soldiers at once. The wounded men just spit blood, falling defeated before they even understand what hit them. Watching the massacre, the rest of the troops retreat in shock, questioning what kind of monster that is. Irritated by the hesitation, the squadron commander shouts, demanding that they kill the boy already since he is alone. Pressed by the order, the soldiers advance in a group toward the MC in a desperate attempt. Taking advantage of the charge, Chrono strikes like lightning across the battlefield, slicing anyone in his path. In the blink of an eye, the commander looks up in despair as he notices the hero leaping right toward him. Bathed in a powerful aura, the boy lands hard in the middle of the enemy group, ready for the execution. Focusing all his energy, the swordsman prepares the third form of his signature combat style. With a devastating attack, he unleashes a massive explosion of power that obliterates the adversaries completely. Once again, the shadow voice echoes in the back of his mind, ordering him to kill the Necromancer for the soul of his beloved. And with that goal in mind, the former master swordsman just lets out a long sigh in that child's body. After finishing the massacre without shedding a drop of sweat, he walks calmly through the landscape taken over by destruction. With the battlefield cleared, the boy still exudes a strong magical aura and declares the end of the fight. Impressed by his own results, he observes his clenched fists and agrees that that power is almost absurd. Standing in the middle of the fallen bodies, he recognizes that the techniques he used are from his own sword style. However, analyzing the reflection in the steel of the blade, the hero admits he had never had such a reserve of magical energy in his original life. The reminder from the god of the underworld resurfaces, explaining that this divine power would last for only 3 short minutes. Thoughtful about the rules of the deal, Chrono realizes that this great time limitation is the true cost of the miracle. Furthermore, the disturbing memory of Gilgran piercing his undead wife flashes like a painful lightning bolt through his head. Furious with the memory, the MC swears that his only goal is to destroy Gilgran, and he cares about nothing else in the world beyond that. Analyzing the level of damage around him, he deduces calmly that the enemy must not have traveled very far from the location yet. Certain of what he needs to do, the swordsman promises himself he will hunt the sorcerer wherever he is hiding. However, a terrible chill goes up his spine, cutting off his determination and making his eyes widen in instant shock. Without any warning, the sword falls from his inert hand, slipping through his fingers as soon as the divine time reaches its end. Agonizing in pain, the boy feels as if his mana is completely blind and tearing his body from the inside. Desperate with the situation, he realizes that all his magical energy is shrinking at an alarming rate. Unable to keep himself steady, the hero extends a trembling hand while trying to understand the reason for losing his strength so suddenly. Taken by deep frustration, the swordsman just lets out a curse, noting that the miracle has come to an end. With his vision darkening for good, the MC mutters that he can no longer stay awake and collapses. Meanwhile, mysterious voices echo in the darkness, complaining about the place, noting that apparently a great battle took place around there. Soon the scene changes, revealing a calm and sunny forest, totally distant from that zone of destruction. A person comes down the dirt trail humming, demonstrating that he is in a great mood during the walk. But the light mood is interrupted as soon as the figure comes face to face with a young man passed out face down in the brush. Standing before the fallen body, a woman complains about the boy being alone out there and warns that he is nothing more than a big nuisance. Cold and without showing the slightest pity, she decrees that this time the boy named Sheik will remain dead forever. Awake on the ground, the swordsman hears the conversation and finally understands that this is the original name of his new body. As she turns her back to walk away, the woman makes it clear that the family has no room for failures and tells him to rot right there in the dirt. Then, the hero opens one eye with an intense glow and guarantees internally that he has no interest in living using a fake name anyway. Determined not to give up on his vengeance, he grabs the earth firmly and starts to gather his last bits of energy. One of the boys warns that Sheik will be left alone, guaranteeing that the beasts will find him soon. Then, the other brother orders them to release the ropes immediately. Confused, Grieca mocks him, asking if his partner is begging for the prisoner's life. Facing the boy on the ground, Grieca warns that he will only say this once. With the MC casting an implacable gaze, the boy orders him to untie himself, Noticing the terrifying pressure in the air, Grika retreats, completely terrified. Totally nervous, Griot pulls his brother, warning that they should leave soon. Without understanding a reaction, Grika asks what he's afraid of, since it is only the useless sheik. The youngest even tries to tell his brother to look at the prisoner, but gives up in the middle of the sentence. Irritated, Grika shouts that such a pathetic attitude is unacceptable for those who carry the Gilgran name. With fury overflowing, the hero listens to the aggressor order the youngest to keep a firm stance. Soon after, the two run off through the forest while Griot asks to be waited for. Stressed with the situation, Grika just clicks his tongue, demonstrating all his dissatisfaction. Left in the dirt, the swordsman continues to follow the escape with absolute attention. From afar, the coward shouts at the MC to stop staring at him and tells him to be devoured by the beasts. Watching the two disappear in the distance, the hero reflects on the situation calmly. He mutters the names Grika and Griot, keeping the information in his memory. Thinking about the nickname useless without mana, the MC notes that makes even less sense now. However, remembering that they mentioned the name Gilgran makes it clear that he needs to rip answers out of them. Determined to act, he understands that first he needs to find a way to get out of those ropes. But the silence of the forest is broken by a sudden boom, raising dust right behind him. A giant beast with deadly horns emerges from the shadows right at the boy's back. Looking over his shoulder, he notices the rhinoceros monster ready for the kill. Impressed by the beast's massive size, he wonders if that is the lord of the region. Without wasting time, the monster charges hard and crushes the ground where its target was tied up. Managing to leap away at the last second, the hero recognizes that the situation is terrible. Seeing the beast prepare another strike, he knows that any hit on this fragile body will be fatal. At least the destruction from the attack served to snap the ropes that were holding him. Enraged, the rhinoceros charges again, swinging its head with full force. Escaping by a hair, the swordsman grinds his teeth, confirming that he really cannot use magic. Dodging the attacks in the air, the boy tries to understand how he managed to release that insane mana before. The beast hits the earth with blind fury, shattering stones in all directions. Feeling the collateral damage of the impact, the MC grinds his teeth, bruised. Implacable, the giant monster prepares one more brutal assault against the vulnerable target. Frustrated with his weakness, the hero laments having returned to life without being able to defeat even a wild animal. Then, painful memories of his subordinates turned into zombies invade his mind all at once. The traumatic image of the enemy controlling the lifeless body of his beloved resurfaces with strength. The arrogant face of the Necromancer calling his true name fuels the hatred stored in his chest. Consumed by absolute fury, the boy's eyes glow intensely, emanating real danger. Ignoring the pain and the lack of energy, he decrees that none of that matters now. Heading straight for the final clash, the hero swears he will kill that wretch, cost what it may. Far from the forest, an enormous and luxurious mansion stands calmly under the afternoon sun. Through the elegant hallways of the property, Grika and Griot walk hurriedly after their escape. Breaking the tense mood, the older one finds it strange that their father hasn't returned yet and thinks the situation is rare. As they turn the corner, they run into a group of family soldiers discussing serious matters. Noticing the commotion, Grika asks what happened while the soldier questions where the two of them were. The man warns that the squadron sent to clean up the revolution in Ganshibal was totally wiped out. Hearing that tragic news catches the brothers completely by surprise, leaving them paralyzed. Still shaken, the informant comments that they have no idea who could have caused such devastation. Immediately, a strong suspicion starts to take over Griot's thoughts. Cold sweat, he turns to his brother, remembering that was the exact place where they left Sheik. With a trembling voice, he questions if the boy they left behind could know something important. But Grika soon gets irritated with a theory, guaranteeing that a loser like that wouldn't know anything at all. Heavy footsteps approach in the hallway, making Griot warn that their father has arrived to greet them. Unable to push away the fear, the boy suggests that perhaps it was a mistake to leave his brother to die. Losing his patience, the older one tells him to shut his mouth and repeats that has no importance whatsoever. Confident that they got away with it, he turns his back, betting that someone like the MC would never be a threat. However, the immense double doors of the mansion fly into the air in an absurd explosion of pure magical energy. Grika barely has time to react, while the solid wood is hurled violently through the main hall. The devastating impact hits the guards square on, crushing one of them without a chance for defense. Griot shrinks, terrified by the destruction, and shouts desperately for his older brother. The soldiers panic completely, demanding to know what caused that surprise attack at the main entrance. In the middle of the dust, a voice warns that they should have covered their tracks better and calls them dear brothers. Hearing that threatening tone leaves everyone in the hall completely petrified with absolute fear. Walking calmly through the wreckage, the MC emerges dragging the severed head of the beast on his back. Wrapped in a burning aura, he warns that he has some very important questions to ask the boys. Satisfied with the general shock, the hero decrees that first, he will return the favor they did in the forest. Internally, he reflects on how he managed to force the release of that crushing power again. Analyzing his own physical state, he notes that the excruciating pain from the first time has disappeared completely. Facing his glowing hand, he questions if this has to do with the 3-minute limit or some other hidden motive. Paralyzed by terror, the aggressors just watch the boy they left for dead, overflowing with energy. One of the soldiers finally recognizes him, shocked, while Griel mutters his brother's name in pure despair. The guards question how the boy without mana has that power, but the swordsman ignores their comments. Dropping the monster's head on the ground, he warns that thinking about that doesn't matter, because he only has one goal in mind. Pointing his sharp blade, the hero demands they tell him exactly where Gilgran is hiding. Without understanding a thing, one of the guards questions what the boy is talking about. Before the situation gets worse, a maid steps in front and begs young Master Sheik to stop. Caught totally off guard by the sudden intrusion, the hero looks back, confused. Meanwhile, Griot continues to writhe in pain on the ground after the beatdown. The woman soon reprimands the MC, remembering that she always tells him to play nicely with his brothers. Still without any idea what is going on, the swordsman wonders mentally who that girl is. Bowing in apology, she promises the soldiers that she will give the young master a lecture. Acting fast, the maid drags the boy away from there, asking them to overlook the incident for today. Standing in the middle of the destruction, the soldiers just watch the scene, totally sweaty and confused. Looking at the giant head of the slain monster, one of them asks what kind of madness that was, but no one has the answer. Already safe inside a room, the woman lets out a long sigh of relief that they escaped. Turning to the boy, she questions what he had in his head to make such a scene in front of everyone. Worried about the future, the servant laments not knowing how the brothers will retaliate after that humiliation. Without patience for the sermon, the hero tells her to shut her mouth and asks who she is, getting lectured more for his rebellious attitude. Adopting a much more serious tone, the maid explains that in that family, power is everything and that irritating the strong without having mana is dangerous. With a trembling voice, the girl confesses that just thinking about the consequences of that act makes her terrified. She tries to finish the sentence but ends up hesitating in silence before the boy. Analyzing the situation, the MC concludes internally that his new body really cannot use magic. Then, the servant quickly wipes away her tears to try to keep her composure. Regaining her composure, she pours a teapot and guarantees that she has taken care of him for a long time as his personal maid. Serving a cup, she claims to have witnessed all the blood, sweat, and tears that he has shed over the years. Handing over the drink, the woman laments the sadness that the boy carries for never being able to manifest his magical energy. Soon after, she explains that mana is the life force that supposedly inhabits all human beings. However, she highlights that only a few chosen ones manage to transform that into energy to use in magic or swordsmanship. Detailing the 7 levels of classification, she notes that the brothers have already reached the 4th level, but he has yet to awaken anything. The maid recalls how much he was always despised by everyone in the house, even receiving a tiny room to live in. Kneeling on the floor, the girl confesses that her heart hurts a lot to see him suffer like that. Touched by the sudden sincerity, the swordsman widens his eyes, impressed by her words. Touching the boy's face, she recalls that the first scar occurred at 5 years old, and the other in the summer he turned 6. Holding his hand against her chest, the servant promises she remembers every bruise on his body and his heart. Completely devoted, the woman begs that her only wish is to see the young master safe and far from trouble. Hearing that affectionate venting, the boy looks away and stays silent for an instant. Scratching his head, he lies, saying he just lost his patience at the entrance and promises to be more careful in the future. Demonstrating gratitude, the hero apologizes sincerely for having made her so worried. Relieved by the response, the maid just nods quietly, still staring at him fixedly. But curiosity gets the best of her, and she questions how he managed to win that fight without using any magic. Thoughtful, the boy realizes that the servant arrived late and didn't witness the moment he released the golden aura. Internally, he admits that he wouldn't know how to explain reincarnation or the use of his old swordsmanship techniques. Suspicious of that silence, the woman asks if he happened to use some dirty trick to win the fight. Without an out, the MC agrees, sweating cold, admitting to himself that his divine power is basically an absurd cheat code. Disappointed, she warns that she would like to see him fight with honor, but recognizes that his cruel life justifies those attitudes. The swordsman concludes that, in any case, no one in that terrible family would care about a surprise attack. Changing the subject, he tries to ask about Gilgran's whereabouts, but the maid notices someone approaching the room. The door opens, revealing a guard, who warns about the Patriarch's return and demands the boy's presence in the West Hall. Caught completely off guard by the news, the hero repeats the word father while trying to process the information. As soon as he arrives in the main hall, the guards open the gigantic doors and announce the boy's presence. Sitting on the imposing throne, the Necromancer receives the boy, calling him his incompetent son. Upon seeing that despicable face, the hero goes into absolute shock and stammers the name of his killer. Completely paralyzed, he takes a step back and wonders what the sorcerer is doing there. With a cold and authoritarian look, the villain orders his son to approach the throne immediately. Falling to his knees from the revelation, the swordsman understands that the patriarch of that entire family was the wretch Gilgran. An uncontrollable fury takes over his body, making him grind his teeth with force while staring at the enemy up close. In that moment, the voice of the god of the underworld resonates in his mind, promising an opportunity for vengeance against that cursed one. With tears of hatred streaming down his face, the MC deduces that destiny must be playing a joke on him. Clenching his fists firmly, he decides that he will take the chance and kill the Necromancer right there, without wasting any more time. Determined to attack, the boy prepares to pounce, while his father waits patiently in silence. However, the swordsman soon curses quietly upon realizing that something is very wrong with his body. Holding his own trembling hand, he panics, noticing that his magical energy simply refuses to manifest again. Breaking the tense silence, the Patriarch states that he called the boy there for one reason only, leaving his target sweating cold. Resting his head on his hand, the villain reveals he has heard rumors that the useless boy humiliated Greeka completely and asks if it is true. Beside the MC, the maid notices the tension in the air and freezes completely with fear. Desperate, she bows, trembling, and begs for mercy, swearing that the young master is deeply sorry for the confusion. But the Necromancer tolerates the interruption and demands immediate silence with a crushing voice. Pressed by the Patriarch's murderous aura, the servant retreats, letting out a groan of dread, almost unable to breathe. Turning his attention back to his son, the villain warns that he doesn't intend to punish him, but wants to find out what kind of trick the useless one used to win. Without warning, the man summons a gigantic undead hydra with several heads, which emerges roaring through the hall. Shocked by the level of the summoning, the boy recognizes the rotted creature immediately. With the monster drooling at his back, Gilgran decrees that power there is absolute and orders the boy to prove his own strength. Cornered, the hero remains paralyzed in his spot, analyzing the completely unfavorable situation. He raises his head slowly, facing the colossal monstrosity ready to tear him apart. Terrorized, the maid warns that the beast is at the 6th level of mana, possessing enough strength to rival a small army. Concentrating an enormous purple sphere in its mouth, the monster prepares the attack while the woman screams for the young master to flee. In a fraction of a second, the Hydra fires a massive blast of pure destructive energy against the target. Moving by pure survival instinct, the MC grabs the servant and leaps to dodge the deadly explosion. Landing in safety, the swordsman notes that the Necromancer heavily modified the creature to surpass the 4th level of normal strength for the species. The Necromancer observes the trail of destruction and states that a human without magic could never defeat that monster. Wrapped in flames, the MC reflects that he has no idea where his strength comes from or what will happen to his body if he keeps using it. But with his eyes glowing in pure hatred, he decrees mentally that he doesn't care one bit about the consequences. With the sword firm in his hand, the hero decides that only killing the villain first matters, asking his body to hold out just one more time. He then turns and faces the gigantic undead Hydra roaring in front of him. Terrorized by the situation, the maid screams desperately for her young master. In that moment, a colossal explosion of red and shadowy energy erupts from the boy's body. The Patriarch lets out a murmur of surprise, totally intrigued to see the useless one showing off such power. Holding his blade, the swordsman becomes completely covered by that threatening and destructive aura. The girl trembles on the floor and stammers the boy's name, completely in shock. Shocked by the absurd energy, the servant deduces, terrified, that surpasses the 7th level and wonders how he can use mana. With a deadly expression, the boy just casts a lethal glance backward. As for the villain, he concludes that the boy doesn't use common magic and deduces that he is hiding some secret. Ignoring the enemy's doubts, the MC focuses only on what he needs to do. With a confident smile and his aura burning violently, the hero warns that now it is the Necromancer's turn. Facing the monstrosity and his own father, the boy prepares for the imminent confrontation. The swordsman decrees the attack, advancing fiercely while the villain just laughs, finding the situation amusing. The maid cries, begging for the boy upon seeing him run straight to his death. Desperate, she screams with all her strength, asking him to stop and not go any further. Stopping in the middle of the path, the hero turns his face and tells the servant to stay behind. With a bloodthirsty look, he warns coldly that he will kill her as she gets in his way. Hearing that cruel threat makes the woman retreat, totally paralyzed by fear and shock. She mutters the boy's title while fallen on the ground, while he resumes his lethal walk. Satisfied with the scene, the patriarch praises his own son's murderous look. The necromancer confesses that he can barely recognize the boy and notes that the servant cannot withstand that crushing pressure in the environment. With an arrogant smile, the villain praises the impressive power and asks what the useless one's next step will be. Consumed by the fury of his past life, the MC warns that he will massacre the sorcerer right there. Making a tremendous leap, the hero advances through the air, wielding his heavy blade against his target. Without hesitation, he brings the sword down in a brutal and devastating attack loaded with shadowy energy. However, the boy widens his eyes upon feeling the impact of his weapon being blocked suddenly. The collision creates a shockwave, but the attack is barred by the necromancer's magic shield. Sparks fly with the blade trying to pierce the impenetrable purple defense, without success. The MC grinds his teeth, forcing his muscles to the limit to break the barrier at any cost. Impressed by the absurd brute force of the blow, the villain widens his eyes slightly. Taking advantage of the opening, the boy gets momentum backward and demands that his father not look away. With a fierce scream, the hero delivers a new vertical attack, even more devastating, with his dark aura. The sorcerer maintains a firm stance to reinforce his defense and contain the brutal impact of the sword. Refusing to retreat, the swordsman initiates a mind-blowing sequence of explosive blows against the shield. Despite the furious charge, the patriarch defends everything with ease and mocks, saying the son is still weak. Intact after the bombardment, the villain recognizes that this level of strength is far superior to what the boy had before. Panting from the extreme effort, the MC retreats, feeling the physical wear and tear start to weigh him down. Curious, the necromancer questions how he obtained that and suggests it might be the awakening of the family lineage. Sweating cold, the boy realizes that the situation is shaping up exactly as it did in his past life. He remembers when he was defeated and questions mentally what kind of absurd strength the villain has. The hero focuses his lethal vision on the enemy, concluding that words like strong or dangerous don't even come close to describing the sorcerer. The boy faces the patriarch's oppressive energy and deduces that there is something very wrong with that hidden mana. Remembering his massacre, he is sure that facing the monster head-on now will only result in absolute death. The MC clenches his bruised fist, feeling his old master swordsman instinct screaming a warning. Frustrated with the crushing difference, the hero bites his lip, questioning if he is going to end up losing everything one more time. Breaking the tense silence, the necromancer asks what is wrong and why the useless one doesn't say anything. With an ironic tone, the villain decides that silence is a great response to the boy's humiliation. Explaining his sadistic philosophy, the father declares that victory is the only justice and that weakness is a terrible sin. Satisfied, the sorcerer recognizes that the boy killed the Hydra and will forgive the insolence of having raised the sword against him. He even offers a reward, ordering his son to say what his greatest desire is. Realizing the provocation, the swordsman questions himself desperately about what step he should take now to survive. Images of his old companion smiling invade his mind as a reminder of what was lost. The gentle face of his beloved wife also appears, turning quickly into the terrifying zombie the villain created. With trembling hands, the hero swears to focus only on what he can do for them, without making any fatal error now. The tactic shifts, and he concludes that his first goal must be to expose all the enemy's disgusting secrets. Waiting patiently for the response, the necromancer remains in silence before hearing the boy finally call him. Kneeling on the ground, the MC feigns submission and asks to see the undead the father controls. Caught by surprise by the unusual request, the villain questions the boy's sudden interest in those monsters. The hero maintains a serious posture and confirms his desire without looking away for even a second. Accepting the whim, the necromancer turns his back and orders the useless one to follow him immediately. The two go through the doors of the main home and enter the dark hallways of the immense mansion. While they go down a spiral stone staircase, the patriarch asks what the real reason is for him wanting to see the zombies now. Inventing an excuse, the boy lies, saying he felt the father's strength in the Hydra and wants to learn how to obtain that same power. The swordsman's trembling hand rests on the stone wall to disguise the pain, while the villain agrees with the reasoning. Noticing his son's slow steps, the sorcerer stops on the step and asks if something is wrong. With his head down, the boy disguises the situation, stating that he is just a bit tired from the recent fight. Internally, he curses desperately, feeling the same excruciating pain as before, as if his body were being cut into pieces. With his body bathed in cold sweat, the hero promises himself that he cannot pass out there because of his old subordinates. He focuses on his beloved's face with iron determination to manage to withstand his body's failure. Far from the dark mansion, night activity takes over a brightly lit city. Then, a tall and muscular man with long red hair tied back emerges in the room, calling for someone. Chrono turns his face, surprised, upon hearing his wife's soft voice calling him. Hannah emerges wearing a long, elegant outfit and asks anxiously if that party dress suits her. Totally flustered by the woman's beauty, the swordsman can barely form a sentence and just stammers her name. Looking away in embarrassment, he grumbles that he doesn't understand anything about appearances, leaving his wife irritated by the dry response. Soon, she approaches, fixing the collar of his uniform and warning that things don't work that way. Hannah explains gently that he's a warrior admired by everyone, and she needs to be up to par as his partner. Carefully, the girl finishes adjusting the details of her husband's clothes so he looks presentable. Admiring the result, the wife gives a warm smile and compliments his wonderful look. In the dark current reality, the boy grinds his teeth while walking, apologizing mentally for having failed to protect her. He swears silently that he will certainly bring down the Necromancer once and for all. Then, the patriarch stops walking and announces that they have finally reached their destination. In front of them, an enormous underground hall extends, plunge into darkness. Walking to the edge of the stone structure, the sorcerer positions himself to show what he is hiding down there. Upon looking down, the boy widens his eyes, completely in shock at the macabre scene. A sea of glowing, crawling zombies infests the bottom of the immense pit, letting out frightening groans incessantly. Observing that multitude of corrupted souls, the MC questions what kind of absolute madness that is. He is totally paralyzed, trying to process the absurd amount of undead piled up in the location. Maintaining his usual coldness, Gilgran explains that the dead possess no emotions or willpower of their own. However, the Necromancer reveals that very rarely he ends up finding some interesting specimen in the middle of that empty mass. Pointing to the pit, the villain highlights a specific zombie that cries without stopping since she was reanimated. The monster stretches out in agony toward the top, making the patriarch deduce that the creature seems to be waiting for someone. In that moment, the swordsman recognizes the mutilated figure and freezes instantly, realizing that that apparition is his beloved wife. Pulling the zombie by the hair in a cruel way, the sorcerer finds it fascinating how human will persists even after death. The villain notices his son's silence and invites him to see the creature up close, since he wanted so much to look at the monsters. The undead reaches out her rotted hand forward, groaning in pure suffering without consciousness of anything. Consumed by hatred, the hero clenches his fist with such force that he starts to bleed, cursing his father mentally. Trembling with rage, the boy bows his head, repeating without stopping that he will assassinate the sorcerer at any cost. But despite the crazy desire to attack, he forces his own mind to calm down and understands that now is not the right moment. The gentle image of his beloved appears in his mind, making the hero implore her to hang on just a little longer. With a definitive decision, the MC swears to crawl through a sea of blood if necessary to discover the enemy's secrets. Faced with that immense pit of souls, the boy lets out a shocked murmur, trying to understand the scale of that dark power. Observing his own monstrous creation, the Necromancer starts to lecture about the pathetic nature of the dead. Standing on the stone balcony, the villain reinforces that those carcasses are nothing more than empty dolls incapable of feeling anything. Turning his face to the boy, the patriarch reveals his fascination for a very specific specimen that escaped that natural rule. He points to the bottom, showing the undead in tears and suggesting in a sadistic way that she awaits a savior. The swordsman recognizes his wife in that deplorable state and widens his eye, feeling desperation take over his body. Holding the creature by the head like a trophy, the father notices his son's shock and asks with irony if that was what he desired. Throwing the zombie slightly forward, the villain orders the boy to pay close attention to the pitiful aberration. The undead raises her rotted arm and points in the MC's direction while letting out an agonizing groan. Facing the macabre scene, the boy absorbs all that suffering silently and transforms the deep sadness into pure hatred. Far from there, the rain falls hard on the bedroom window while the MC remains sitting on the bed, unable to close his eyes. Shrunk near the faint lighting of the lamp, he tries desperately to process the psychological torture he just suffered. With his gaze sparking with rage, the hero begs his beloved for forgiveness and swears he will destroy Gilgran as quickly as possible. The desire for absolute vengeance burns intensely in his chest like an unbreakable promise. When the day finally dawns, the imposing mansion of the Necromancer's family is bathed in the calm morning light. Breaking the room silence, the maid opens the door politely and wishes the young master a good morning. As soon as she enters the room, the girl lets out an exclamation of surprise upon noticing the boy already awake. Leaning on the window with a thoughtful expression, the hero just confirms in a low voice while she stammers, surprised. With quick steps, the servant apologizes for the delay and warns that she will prepare hot tea immediately for him. Carefully, the woman serves the steaming drink in the porcelain cup to try to comfort the boy. The maid holds the tray against her body, sweating cold, visibly nervous with his intimidating presence. Ignoring the servant's restlessness, the swordsman continues with a cold gaze, lost in the landscape outside. The girl cannot stop remembering the cruel death threat she received the day before as she got in his way. Unable to contain her nervousness, the woman bows in despair and asks for forgiveness for having lost her composure during the confrontation. Trying to lighten the heavy mood, she comments excitedly about the boy's awakening of magic and the absurd display of strength. The MC turns his face, facing the servant while hearing her claim that she is genuinely happy for that achievement. Focused only on his goal, the hero ignores the kind words and reinforces mentally that he needs to unravel the enemy's secrets. Observing a spiderweb on the window, the boy realizes that dirty tricks would never work against the father's crushing strength. The Necromancer's purple aura haunts the MC's thoughts, making it clear that there are too many gaps in his current knowledge. Needing urgent answers to act, the swordsman turns his attention back to the maid who is still calling for him nervously. With tears in her eyes, the servant shakes her hands, desperate, and begs him to stop ignoring her in such a cruel way. Wiping her wet face, the girl sobs, swearing she was only worried about the relationship between the young man and the patriarch and wanted to help. The hero loses his frightening posture upon seeing the woman's crying, stammering that he was just distracted with his own thoughts. Making a huge drama, the maid turns her back, hugging her own body, and cries, believing that the boy now hates her. Completely exhausted with all that theatrics, the MC decides to get straight to the point and questions if the servant knows anything about the Necromancer. Caught by surprise by the sudden question, the woman blinks, confused, stopping her crying right there. Calming her spirits, the maid laments not having information and explains that being near that aura seemed to suck away her own life force. The swordsman concludes that he wants the only one to notice that sinister presence that completely distorts reality around it. Remembering the world's rules, the hero knows that magic is the essence of life, but the sorcerer's power acts by devouring that energy. With this valuable new clue in hand, the boy deduces that the key to unraveling the enemy's strength must lie precisely in that anomaly. Changing the subject completely, the servant confesses she is very worried about tomorrow because of the boy's injuries. Upon hearing that mention, the boy is left without understanding anything and returns the question with an expression of genuine confusion about a test. Scared by his forgetfulness, the girl remembers that tomorrow is the terrible mandatory assessment for those who turn 10 years old. Immediately, the swordsman connects the dots and mutters, irritated about the cruel training imposed by the family lineage. Without a single shred of patience, the hero turns his face, discarding the idea right there, leaving the maid in panic with his refusal. The maid explains that participating in this assessment in the year 1 turns 10 is an absolute rule in the family lineage. She warns that those who fail or refuse to participate end up being banished, since the weak have no space in that house. The hero grumbles, irritated, wondering why the Necromancer is so obsessed with making people prove their own strength. With hatred boiling, the MC deduces that this bizarre rule might have some direct relation to the secrets of that dark power. Focused on that, the boy turns to the servant and questions if passing the test means getting closer to the villain. Caught by surprise by the boy's sudden ambition, the woman hesitates a little before being able to formulate a response. Soon, she confirms that the approved ones can enter the guard unit and receive orders directly from the patriarch. The next day, the great courtyard of the imposing mansion wakes up full of candidates preparing for the assessment. In the middle of that anxious crowd, one of the youths turns his face confused upon noticing an unexpected presence approaching. With a firm posture and wielding a wooden sword, the MC walks calmly toward the meeting point. The other boys start whispering, totally shocked by his presence in that dangerous place. Unable to believe it, they wonder if the useless one without magic really intends to participate in the mortal challenge. Observing the scene from afar, Grika clicks his tongue, irritated, and comments that he expected to see the failure choosing direct banishment. The older brother remembers the flash from the day before, but deduces with arrogance that the boy just had pure luck. While they walk, the maid calls for the young master with a trembling voice, clearly terrified by the situation. She begs, desperate for him not to push his own limits, warning that she wouldn't stand to see him get even more hurt. Without the slightest patience for drama, the swordsman repeats that he is fine and calls the servant annoying in the utmost coldness. However, internally he admits that he has no idea how far he can push the endurance of that fragile body. Even so, the hero understands that being banished now would throw his entire vengeance plan straight into the trash. He concludes that he needs to stay near the Necromancer to investigate the situation and that this test came from heaven. With renewed determination, the MC swears to pass the assessment and surpass everyone using the young master's identity. The swordsman promises to discover the truth about that bizarre strength to finally save his wife's soul. Then, the boy's thoughts are interrupted when a mocking voice calls his attention. A bully accompanied by his gang blocks his path with an arrogant smile, questioning what he is doing there. He shows surprise that the boy survived the wild forest, stating that the coward must have fled crying. Trying to defend the boy, the maid tries to intervene, but the aggressor ignores her, wanting to know if the useless one really is going to take the test. Facing the MC up close, the guy warns that that place isn't a playground and tells him to go back to his room. Suddenly, the bully's arrogant expression vanishes upon noticing a quick movement coming his way. The hero hits the aggressor's face, who soon starts to mock, asking if that was supposed to be a real punch. Maintaining a bored expression, the swordsman just stares the guy in the eyes and states that he talks too much. Immediately, the bully's eyes roll back while his body loses all its strength in a bizarre way. One of the cronies is left totally without reaction, asking, scared, what strange thumping noise that was. Unable to keep himself standing, the aggressor collapses on the ground, foaming at the mouth and groaning in pain. The young man's body hits the courtyard stone with violence, raising dust and cutting the gang's mocking mood. The crony panics upon seeing his friend passed out so suddenly and inexplicably right in front of him. Trembling with fear, the guy faces the MC and wonders if the useless one really caused all that damage. With total calm, the hero warns that the bully will sleep for half a day and even asks who the heck he is. Watching everything from afar, Grika goes into shock, trying to understand since when his brother knows how to use martial arts. The confusion is interrupted by the arrival of an official in glasses who demands an end to that ridiculous spectacle in the courtyard. Checking his pocket watch, the instructor announces that the scheduled time has arrived and orders all candidates to gather. The swordsman adjusts his stance and maintains a sharp gaze, ready to discover what really awaits him. With everyone's attention on the official, the definitive moment of the dangerous assessment finally begins. The instructor explains that the 23 youths gathered there carry the blood of the lineage and are the official candidates. He runs his severe gaze through the line of novices and demands confirmation that everyone understood the position. Without hesitation, the entire group responds in unison, agreeing with the test official's declaration. The official pulls a document from his pocket and warns that he will read the rules aloud just to follow standard protocol. He begins reading, formalizing the strength test, promising spots in the guard for those who show capacity in combat. The instructor reinforces that this elite unit operates solely and exclusively under the direct orders of the great Necromancer. The duties of the approved include serving as personal bodyguards and executing extremely violent military missions. The bloody test is the only way to prove one's own value and guarantee the right to be part of that implacable squadron. The evaluation method consists of surviving on a mountain infested by the most dangerous magical beasts in the region. With extreme coldness, the man warns that every year several candidates die right in the first forest and orders them to prepare. The tension in the courtyard reaches its limit when the villain's drawled voice echoes, announcing the addition of a new rule. With an imposing stance, the patriarch walks to the courtyard under the terrified gazes of all the young people present. Immediately, all the candidates and officials kneel in a sign of absolute submission to the family's implacable master. Noticing the boy's rigid posture, the maid whispers, desperate, asking him to lower his head in disguise. The macabre image of his beloved turned into a zombie invades his mind, fueling even more the desire for destruction. With his teeth clenched, he swears to himself that he will overcome that absurd challenge at any cost. The boy clenches his own chest, feeling the pain return, fighting to control the fury that threatens to explode any second. Unable to erase the hatred, the swordsman faces the floor, cursing silently the name of the cursed sorcerer. Breaking the heavy silence, the necromancer finally reveals that the extra challenge that year will be to protect an undead. Exhibiting a sadistic smile, the villain explains that each participant will receive a private zombie and will need to defend it with their own life. Hearing the orders, some novices deduce that the test is nothing more than prior training to protect the master himself in the future. Without wasting time, the officials start to fasten thick iron chains to the wrists of each of the scared candidates. From the top of the staircase, the sorcerer warns that the creature's mana supply has been cut and they will not revive if they are destroyed. Maintaining the ironic tone, the father mocks, saying that this fragility limitation makes the monsters worthy of protection. The metallic handcuffs connect the hero's wrist directly to the rotted arm of his new bizarre partner. Facing the crawling creature beside him, the boy curses the villain mentally for the completely sick idea. He shakes the chain and lets out an irritated grumble at the slowness and the appearance of that useless monster he needs to carry. Nearby, Griot retreats, terrified, upon noticing that the undead tied to his chain won't stop crying. The the coward brother continues to complain about the scary monster, instantly attracting the MC's shocked attention. Noticing the disturbance in the courtyard, the Necromancer faces the swordsman fixedly, knowing exactly the weight of that cruel provocation. Consumed by rage, the hero grinds his teeth upon seeing his beloved wife being treated like test trash by the family. Ignoring the boy's fury, the patriarch opens his arms with his back turned and decrees the official beginning of the slaughter on the mountain. The MC accepts the impossible challenge with his blood boiling, swearing to destroy the villain as soon as he overcomes that cursed ordeal. Raising his hand with purple flames, the patriarch decrees that the first stage is survival. Observing the youths from above, he orders his children to depart and show all the strength they possess to protect the assigned undead. Facing the villain at the top of the staircase, the boy remains firm while the other candidates let out exclamations of surprise. With his red eyes glowing with hatred, the hero swears mentally that he will overcome that brutal ordeal. Thus, he will manage to get closer to the Necromancer and finally discover the true secret of that bizarre power. Understanding that this is the only path possible now, the swordsman accepts facing as many ordeals as necessary. The memory of his old body burns in his memory while he makes an unbreakable promise to kill the sorcerer and save his wife. Days before, in the comfort of the room, the maid explained that in that house, strength was everything and that the special training started right at birth. She reported that children of the lineage were forced to hunt wild animals and magical beasts on the mountains to prove their value. Furthermore, the servant told in a dark way that the test involved even the hunting of other human beings. The level of cruelty was such that brothers were left on a desert island where only the survivors had the right to grow up. Visibly shaken, the girl confessed she thought all that was too sadistic and remembered that the young master himself had also gone through it. Trying not to raise suspicions, the swordsman just agreed, even though he had no idea what that body's past was like. Curious about the subject, he questioned if any specific event had motivated that entire conversation about strength. Nervous for having talked too much, the maid apologized, revealing that the family's obsession with power only started in the current generation. The servant detailed that that tradition of survival only lasted a few decades, showing that the lineage didn't have a long history. Despite that, she explained that the cruel motto turned the house into such a formidable warrior power that even neighboring nations were afraid. Absorbing the information, the swordsman realized immediately that there was a huge hole in that entire story. Observing the imposing mansion outside, he wondered why a family so recent and without honor would be so crazy about absolute strength. Facing a portrait of the patriarch, the hero noted that instead of discovering weaknesses, the mysteries about the enemy only increased. Back to the present in the courtyard, the maid's memory echoed in his mind, reinforcing that he would also need to follow the deadly tradition. To continue in the house and maintain his disguise, he needed obligatorily to be recognized by the family leader. The boy remembered the servant's joyful face, which promised to be extremely happy if he managed to survive and stay there. Then, the MC's thoughts were interrupted by Grika's irritated voice, complaining about the undead beside him. Demanding to switch creatures, the older brother warned the guard that it was impossible to hunt magical beasts carrying useless trash. Calmly, the official explained that the chains were infused with the patriarch's magic and could only be released by the zombies passing or a direct order from the leader. With no other options, the arrogant young man grumbled that it was absurd to lose points in the evaluation because of such a ridiculous restriction. Hearing the complaints from above, the sorcerer coldly warned the boy that he could do whatever he pleased. In an intimidating tone, the villain declared that true strength overcomes any obstacle, and the weak should leave immediately. Terrified by his father's pressure, Grika backed down instantly and bowed, apologizing for his audacity. Trembling with fear, the bully gulped and promised he would complete the test perfectly to prove his worth. Satisfied with the submission, the master ordered his son to push himself, claiming to have high expectations for his performance. The young man sighed in relief at the response and thanked his father, his voice still thick with nervousness. Suddenly, the swordsman broke the tense atmosphere in the courtyard by calling out to the patriarch in a surprisingly calm tone. Drawing every indignant gaze, the hero ignored the surprised whispers of the other candidates and held his ground. Stopping in his tracks, the necromancer turned his head slightly, asking what the failure wanted. Facing the monster who had destroyed his life, the MC declared firmly that he would pass the test to remain by his side. Hiding his pulsing rage behind a mask of obedience, he told the villain to wait for his return with anticipation. Wrapped in thick, purple smoke, the sorcerer warned that success depended entirely on the boy's strength and told him to prove it. As soon as the man disappeared into thin air, the older brother muttered in alarm while the tension in the room dissipated. Regaining his arrogance, Grika turned to the hero, shouting and accusing the boy of being completely disrespectful. Completely out of patience, the MC simply turned his back and ignored him, leaving the bully talking to himself. Focused on what truly mattered, the swordsman stared at the undead bride chained to Griot and issued a direct threat. With a killer look in his eyes, he warned the coward that he would strike him down without hesitation if he dared to lay a finger on the weeping creature. Pale and shaking from head to toe, Griot retreated in complete terror, unable to understand the source of such fury. Watching the bizarre scene, the older brother mistakenly deduced that the loser was making a declaration of rivalry. Misinterpreting everything, the bully bragged, thinking he was being challenged not to give up. Laughing at his own delusion, the boy told the MC to mind his own business, reminding him that he had no magic. Cutting through the youngster's commotion, the official in charge of the trial took control again to keep the event moving. Lifting a lantern filled with potent magical energy, the instructor declared that the first stage of the evaluation would begin. He explained that those mysterious flames were provided by the patriarch himself to mark the start of the slaughter. Suddenly, a magic circle lit up the floor, enveloping all the candidates in thick purple smoke. Feeling his body begin to float, the hero instantly recognized it as a large-scale teleportation spell. Wearing an enigmatic expression, the bespectacled man wished the boys luck before they vanished from the courtyard. Far from the chaos, the maid clasped her hands in a prayer, silently wishing for the MC's survival. In the blink of an eye, the swordsman and his chained partner were dropped into the middle of a dense, eerie forest. Looking at the thick vegetation around them, the boy realized that the transition had been completed without any issues. Hearing no voices nearby, he deduced that each competitor had been sent to a separate area on purpose. However, his keen instincts quickly picked up on someone slinking silently through the shadows. Thinking it might be some kind of hidden evaluator, the hero turned quickly upon hearing a loud noise from above. Surprised, he stared at purple smoke forming in the air, which quickly transformed into glowing letters. The floating message demanded that they survive for 3 days while protecting the zombie, and stated that the death of either one would mean failure. Reading the final rule that pardoned any action taken for survival, he found the idea of killing his own brothers despicable. With that, the boy concluded that the answer to the villain's obsession with absolute power was hidden behind that test. Suddenly, the sunlight was blocked as a massive flying creature plummeted from the trees, targeting the MC. Maintaining an absurd level of calm, the swordsman welcomed the monster's quick arrival since he wouldn't need to waste time hunting. As the giant eagle lunged with sharp talons, the hero reminded himself of the second chance he had received after his demise. Skillfully dodging the beast's brutal attack, he focused his determination on not making any foolish mistakes in this life. Seizing the opening, the young man spun in the air with his sword, accepting that twisted path as his best shortcut. Full of determination, he gripped the hilt of his weapon and swore he would overcome everyone using the young master's identity. With a quick and precise cut, the MC sliced the giant bird in half before it could even react. Sheathing his sword with style, the hero let out a heavy breath as the halves of the monster crashed onto the dirt. Protecting the undead woman behind him, the warrior found it ironic how his past experience with escorts would be useful there. The silence didn't last long, as a massive wild ape soon jumped from the bushes, letting out an ear-splitting roar. Without giving the new threat a break, the swordsman advanced like a bolt of lightning, landing a relentless sequence of strikes on the monster. Irritated by the situation, she complained that the monsters just wouldn't stop appearing one after another. Since his past losses were grave, he decided that he needed to make up for them in the current fight. Facing the creature that roared fiercely, the hero warned that he would use it only as a warm-up. Shortly after taking down the beast without difficulty, he checked to see if his chained partner was all right. Looking upward, the swordsman questioned if there was any evaluator watching his performance in the test. Suddenly, a brutal attack came from above, forcing the boy to raise his sword to defend himself. The attacker was Grika, who mocked the MC for doing well for someone who possessed no mana. Keeping the blades locked, Sheik stared at his brother and asked why that wretch had come after him. Without showing any concern, the bully simply let out a provocative and confident laugh. Then Grika stated that a useless piece of trash shouldn't participate in the trial, and promised to finish him right there. Hearing such nonsense, the hero coldly deduced that the weak truly had no right to live. He realized that this cruel method matched that house perfectly and confessed that he detested the rule. He also remembered that the winner had all his actions pardoned, leaving his older brother intrigued. Staring at Grika with hatred, the MC warned that he would have no mercy since the other had attacked first. Recoiling slightly, the arrogant one complimented the defense, finding it interesting that the boy could withstand the blow without magic. Gripping his sword firmly, the bully shouted his brother's name, preparing to charge again. Without backing away an inch, the hero repeated that his lack of mercy was a direct consequence of the aggression. With an intimidating gaze, the MC promised to show his true power. Dismissing the threat, the older brother gave a mocking chuckle. Grika advanced with full fury, telling the boy without mana to keep barking while he tried to strike him down. The arrogant one decreed that the MC would be the first to be eliminated from the family's lethal trial. Faking a direct cut, the bully used the distraction to launch an explosive at his opponent. The swordsman quickly realized that it was nothing more than a surprise attack with a hidden item. A large explosion consumed the area, causing the older brother to let out a hysterical laugh. Convinced of his opponent's demise, Grika muttered that the useless boy had met the fate he deserved. However, when the smoke cleared, the boy was still standing there unscathed, leaving the attacker perplexed. The bully was in shock, unable to understand how the impact hadn't caused any damage. Appearing quickly from behind, Sheik placed his blade against his enemy's neck and explained about the speed clone. The hero detailed that the high humidity of the forest had made the trick easier even using that weak body. Cold sweat dripping, the brother turned his face, cursing the boy and complaining that those words made no sense. Maintaining his composure, Sheik revealed that in his past life, he had grown tired of facing arrogant trash like him. The swordsman explained that he had predicted the dirty move, based solely on the enemy's flawed stance and shift in weight. Humiliated, Grika grew furious and told the third-rate brat not to underestimate him. The bully cursed in frustration, as the skill gap between the two was massive. With his pride wounded, he refused to accept his own inferiority. The idea of losing to his useless brother without magic ate away at the young man's conceit. Desperate, Grika pulled a dagger and charged, shouting and swearing that there was no way he would lose the fight. Without any effort, the hero dodged the pathetic attack and countered instantly, stomping on his aggressor. Pressing his foot against the armed hand, the MC repeated that a coward's eyes give away their movements. Thrown to the ground and immobilized, the bully could only groan in pain and frustration, unable to do anything. Looking at his opponent's monster, the boy commented that focusing on the useless zombie would be an efficient and obvious tactic. With a ruthless movement, the hero aimed his sword not at his brother, but at the weak point of the pair. The blade perfectly cut the rotting arm, destroying the undead and breaking the connection of the thick chain. Grika screamed in pure despair upon seeing the creature's elimination, which meant his immediate failure. Turning his back on the defeated, the MC warned that it was over and told him to wait for his expulsion. The hero resumed his silent walk through the shadows of the forest, accompanied by his own creature. With his eyes glowing intensely, he warned himself that he could not make any foolish mistakes from that point on. His only goal was to defeat Gilgran and save Hannah's soul, requiring extreme caution to achieve that. Hidden in the trees, the official family inspector watched everything and was surprised by the quick elimination. The man was impressed and wondered if that was really Sheik, as his movements were those of a veteran. Jotting down details in a notebook, the evaluator reported that the boy's strength was absurd and tried to understand the mystery. Far away, Griot was lying on the ground next to Hannah, completely paralyzed with fear. Shaking uncontrollably, the cowardly brother cursed his luck while staring into the darkness of the forest. The reason for his fear was revealed when a colossal magical beast in the form of a boar blocked his path. Completely desperate, the boy realized he had run into a top-tier monster, thinking it was all useless. The gigantic beast puffed out its chest and let out a terrifying roar capable of making the earth tremble. Overcome by panic, Griot got up and fled at full speed, cursing while he cried. From atop a rock, the same inspector followed the pathetic scene of the candidate in constant flight. Evaluating the beast, the man concluded that the boy was as good as dead, as not even Grika could defeat that creature. The boar advanced violently, chasing the coward who dragged the undead woman across the dirt. Out of breath, the younger brother cried, claiming he couldn't handle that absurd survival pressure anymore. In a moment of blind desperation, he thought about giving up on the trial and using the undead woman as bait to escape. The boy looked back, ready to sacrifice the weeping creature toward the furious monster. However, the terrible threat made by the MC in the courtyard echoed in his mind and froze his entire body. He remembered Sheik's killer look, promising to finish him off if the zombie suffered even a single scratch. Paralyzed mid-flight, Griot planted his feet on the ground, cursing the lack of options he had. Summoning sudden courage, the boy stared at the monster and cursed the arrogance of his brother without magic. The image of the MC ordering the protection of the target completely dominated his thoughts. Influenced by the distortion of their previous conversation, he firmly believed that Sheik had challenged him as a rival. With the giant boar breathing nearby, Griot embraced the heroic delusion and decided to face the beast head-on. Sweating cold and grinding his teeth, the coward shouted that he would do the impossible to avoid looking pathetic before his opponent. Using the courage he had never had in his life, the young man conjured and launched a magical attack toward the monster. The spell hit the target square on, causing a massive explosion of energy in the middle of the dense vegetation. Watching from afar, the inspector was surprised by the unusual fact that the timid candidate stopped and fought. Despite the heroic attitude, the man watched the beast ignore the blow and crush the boy with a brutal impact. Facing the giant beast, Griot bitterly concluded that the power gap between them was too great to be overcome. The colossal boar reared its monstrous body, making the young man groan in terror before imminent doom. Fallen to his knees and cursing his luck, the coward accepted that surviving that was completely impossible. Without mercy, the monster brought its immense claw down with crushing force against the defenseless target. Certain he would be smashed, the younger brother just screamed in pure terror, waiting for the final blow. However, upon opening his eyes in confusion, he found Sheik standing in front of him, blocking the attack with a strong, dark aura. Clicking his tongue in annoyance, the MC warned the hideous monster not to get the wrong idea about the situation. He commented that he had arrived just in time, warning Griot that a mana user should understand the massive level gap. Turning his head, Sheik questioned if the timid boy really thought he would appear there to save a rival. With his attention fixed on the beast, the swordsman told the boy to pay close attention to his next words. Thrown to the ground, Griot just stuttered his brother's name, completely incredulous at the heroic rescue. Uncomfortable with the reaction, the hero told his younger brother to stop looking at him that way. Wielding his sword, the MC warned that if he didn't want to die, he should follow him as if his life depended on it. Regaining some of his arrogant posture, the young man complained to the useless one not to act with such superiority. Without giving any importance to the tantrum, Sheik just warned that he was already about to slice that creature up. Behind him, Griot was left not understanding a single thing happening there. The boy noticed that his older brother couldn't take his eyes off the undead woman chained to him. The corrupted creature let out painful whimpers, reaching out her blood-stained hand as if asking for help. Observing his beloved in that deplorable state, the swordsman swore silently that he would certainly save her. With hatred and determination burning in his eyes, the hero asked Hannah mentally to wait just a little longer. Meanwhile, Griot scratched his head in confusion, wondering why the hell the useless one was so interested in a zombie. Creating bizarre theories, the timid boy wondered with disgust if the MC's ideal type was older women. Sweating cold before his brother's obsession, the boy even questioned if he had some sick attraction to corpses. Far from that deadly forest, hot red tea was served delicately in a porcelain cup. In the comfortable quarters of the mansion, the bespectacled evaluator commented to the patriarch that the test was quite lively. Settled in his armchair with a magic orb on the table, Gilgran just let out a disinterested mutter. With extreme coldness, the villain decreed that people without power were completely unnecessary for the family, period. The employee pointed out that the B-tier beast placed in the test was an exaggeration, betting on at most 2 survivors. Raising an eyebrow, the Necromancer mage questioned in an ironic tone if the man was really watching the youngsters. Suddenly, the evaluator went into shock while looking at the observation orb, stuttering that the monster had just evolved to A-tier. Flashing a sadistic smile, the Necromancer confirmed the suspicion without the slightest bit of remorse. Frightened by the revelation, the employee deduced that it was the Lord himself who had surreptitiously altered the creature. Resting his face on his hand, the villain justified that it was just for entertainment and to provide a little more stimulus to the trial. Observing his boss's madness, the evaluator realized that the ordeal would be an absolute hell for the children. He feared for the boys' lives, knowing that no 10-year-old could handle the strength of a monster of that level. Sweating cold with wide eyes, the man remembered that the unique abilities of that beast were devastating. Back in the darkness of the forest, the giant boar exploded in a frightening purple aura, overflowing with pure magic. Terrified by the change, Griot called out for the MC, shouting and wanting to know what they would do now. Showing its new brutal power, the creature stomped hard on the ground, generating electric discharges all over its body. The timid boy fell into total despair upon seeing the beast advance toward them at an absurd speed. With his legs shaking, the younger brother cried, stating that it was impossible for them to defeat such an aberration. Without thinking twice, he turned his back on the danger and ran while dragging the zombie, screaming for them to flee. Seeing the boy's stupidity, the hero cursed the idiot between his teeth while preparing to act. The monster ignored everything and leaped with sharp fangs directly at the back of the coward who was fleeing in tears. Using his extraordinary agility, Sheik advanced like a bolt of lightning and threw himself in front of his brother to block the impact. Withstanding the heavy onslaught, the swordsman shouted indignantly, asking what the hell the timid boy was doing. He threw in his face that turning your back in a fight obviously made you the beast's main target. Without giving them time to rest, the gigantic boar concentrated even more purple energy through its muscles. In an explosive movement, the monster fired dozens of huge thorns from its back, forcing the hero to dodge frantically. The sharp projectiles nailed into the ground, destroying everything, improving the lethal power of that rain of attacks. Immediately after the firing, the aberration's back glowed, and new thorns began to grow in the blink of an eye. Watching from afar, Griot was horrified by the monster regenerating so quickly. Running toward the enemy, Sheik concluded that restoration speed was biologically impossible. With his anger boiling over, the MC immediately deduced that was the work of the family's cursed patriarch. Tired of that mockery, the hero called the beast annoying and landed a deep cut on one of its arms. To the warrior's surprise, the severed limb rebuilt itself instantly, forming an even larger claw. The cowardly brother retreated, stuttering in panic upon seeing the damage was completely nullified again. The monster swung its new arm in a violent blow, forcing the boy to slide backward to avoid being crushed. Analyzing the problem, the hero realized that common attacks would be useless against that infinite regeneration. Holding his sword hilt firmly, he knew that the secret technique from his past life would resolve the situation, but using it would be risky. Evaluating the risks, the MC imagined that the trial's own evaluators must be watching that fight. The image of Gilgren's sadistic face appeared in his mind, confirming that the villain was following his every step. Blocking another rain of thorns, he hesitated at the thought that revealing his unique sword style would draw unnecessary suspicion. Being forced to retreat by the blows, the swordsman feared what would happen if his magical reincarnation were discovered. Landing far from the beast, he wondered what the consequence would be if his true goals of revenge were exposed. The memory of his wife's gentle smile haunted him, knowing that any mistake would cost her eternal salvation. Cutting through his thoughts, the colossal magical boar roared furiously, ready to slaughter him right there. Placing his sword in front of his body, the hero withstood the brutal pressure generated by the creature's presence. He concluded bitterly that adversary could not be defeated while he was lost in vague worries. Resuming his veteran master aura, the warrior demanded calm from himself, as his path had been decided from the beginning. Breaking the tension, Griot bellowed, questioning how the hell the boy without magic had suddenly become so strong. Suspicious, the cowardly brother complained that sudden evolution was too weird to swallow. Holding his weapons hilt tightly, the hero told the useless one to shut his mouth and retreat, as he was too weak to help. Expelling any hesitation, the MC exploded into a colossal pillar of blazing fire, illuminating the entire forest. Watching the scene through the magic orb, the family's evaluator widened his eyes, completely in shock at that level of power. Wrapped in flames, Sheik realized that he could not reveal his true identity, but he couldn't die there either. Wielding his weapon, he decided to use that unknown sword style to annihilate the monster without leaving a single trace. In response, the magical beast let out a furious roar while the MC prepared for the attack. Far from the forest, the family's evaluator watched the crystal orb and had trouble believing the absurdity of the situation. Sweating cold, the man called the patriarch, totally incredulous at the sending of an A-tier creature for the test. He stated that even with the clan's blood running through one's veins, it was impossible for a 10-year-old boy to survive that. Oblivious to the external concern, Sheik advanced with determination and leaped against the terrible monster. In midair, the hero told the hideous beast to bring it on, promising to blow it up until absolutely nothing remained. At that moment, a colossal burst of purple magic fired, tearing through the environment with violence. The force of the attack whipped up a tremendous scale, making Griot scream in despair while trying to hold on. The monster concentrated even more energy and continued firing the lethal ray of destruction from its mouth. Landing on the ground safely, she clicked his tongue in annoyance for having focused too much on defense and failing to finish it. Behind him, Griot continued screaming in terror while the tense climate dominated the battlefield excavated by the magic. Watching the creature recover quickly, the swordsman noted that the regeneration didn't diminish and deduced he would run out of energy. Interrupting the tension, the cowardly brother stuttered, calling out to the MC and pointing, trembling, at something on the ground. Right ahead, they spotted a body fallen in the middle of the destruction, shocking Griot instantly. While the timid boy asked who the man was, Sheik assessed that the test inspector had ended up being hit by the monster's blow. The youngest commented, totally surprised, that he had no idea there was a supervisor watching the group. Just then, the swordsman noticed a small blue flame eyeball on the ground near the corpse. He quickly concluded that Gilgren had been using that magic artifact to spy on them since the start of the trial. With a slight smile, the hero realized he no longer felt the patriarch's vigilant gaze on his actions. Thus, a massive dark aura enveloped the hero, who was now free to use his true combat style. Focused on his goal, he decided to end the fight immediately before they sent another observer to the location. Behind him, the youngest trembled and questioned the hero's attitude, not understanding where all that absurd power had come from. Ignoring the question, Sheik prepared his weapon and activated the first form of his lethal sword style. In a swift movement, the boy delivered a deep vertical cut that hit the magical creature square on. Without giving an opening for defense, the warrior continued advancing like a bolt of lightning through the forest's darkness. The narrator revealed that style was created by the Empire's first swordmaster to slaughter legendary beasts. Currently, the only person capable of mastering all forms of the technique went by the name Chronogaius. Showing his absolute mastery, the hero spun his body in the air and triggered the fourth blade of the devastating attack. The gigantic beast received a barrage of dark cuts, being mercilessly shredded from every side. Taking advantage of the impact's force, Sheik landed on the ground and used his sword to slide and contain his own momentum. However, he ground his teeth in frustration upon realizing that his weak body didn't generate enough impact against an undead. Without wasting time complaining, the warrior leaps toward his adversary, demanding the immediate continuation of the blow. He dove from above with the lethal blade aimed directly at the monstrous target. Enveloped by an imposing magical aura, the MC summoned the third animal form of his sword style. Very far away, the observation orb sustained by Gilgren's magic hands began to crack suddenly. The family's inspector noticed the strange situation and questioned if something had happened to the boss. Maintaining his typical absolute coldness, the Necromancer stated calmly that it was absolutely nothing. Back at the deadly survival test, the forest remained covered by the dense smoke of the intense confrontation. After bringing down the blow, the hero noted with concern that the beast had withstood the direct damage and understood that his physical limit had been reached. Panting, he held his weapon's hilt tightly, trying to quickly find a way out of the disadvantage. With an intense red glow in his eyes, the boy smiled aggressively, accepting the only choice left to him. The horrendous creature ignored its open wounds completely and attacked to crush the target with its destructive claws. In an agile defensive movement, Sheik spun on his own axis, creating a huge golden ring of energy around him. Seeing the scene from afar, Griot went into total despair and screamed for his brother to stop the madness and flee. Ignoring the useless screaming, the MC focused on the wide technique, knowing it lacked destructive power and would drain his strength. Despite the great risk, the hero evoked the form of a hunting hound using the second blade of his forbidden style. The technique's flames rose quickly and transformed into a huge magical cage, imprisoning the aberration. The gigantic boar was completely locked inside the energy lines, unable to advance a single step. Satisfied with the functioning of the perfect trap, the hero warned that he had finally cornered the wretch. Completely furious, the beast roared while an intense and concentrated light began to shine inside its corrupted chest. The warrior explained that the cage served precisely to reveal the beast's vital core, providing the perfect location. Holding his sword firmly in his chained hands, he prepared to put a definitive end to the exhausting confrontation. With cold precision, he focused on the adversary's glow, promising to pierce the weak point without the slightest mercy. The sharp blade cut the creature perfectly, splitting the source of magical energy into two halves. Upon analyzing the remains on the ground, the hero noted the marks of artificial modification, confirming the patriarch's direct involvement. In the middle of the destroyed field, the immense monster fell dead, while the youngest watched everything in absolute shock. The coward stuttered, sweating cold, admitting to himself that he had never witnessed such absurd sword power in his life. Shortly after, insecurity struck and he realized that his status of superiority in the family was in serious danger. The victory ended up costing a lot, as Sheik suffered an immediate collapse and fell to his knees in great pain. Grinding his teeth to withstand the agony, the warrior admitted he had already expected to suffer that kind of brutal reaction. He recognized that he had demanded too much from his unprepared body and ended up collapsing completely on the scarred ground. Seeing the MC's fall, Griot ran hesitantly toward him to check his condition. Standing next to the motionless boy, the cowardly brother stuttered, extremely tense, and wondered if he was still breathing. Meanwhile, the mangled body of the magical beast began to evaporate quickly in a frightening miasma. At that moment, a memory invaded Griot's mind, recalling the cold and authoritarian advice of his lineage. In the dark recollection, his mother's voice made it clear she would never accept the shame of having a son expelled from the family. Back to the bloody reality, the relentless demand to step on his own relatives echoed loudly in his head. The weight of ambition corrupted the young man's innocence, as he understood the urgent need to eliminate rivals for glory. Overcome by a dark thought, the timid boy broke into a wicked smile, staring at the hero fallen in front of him. Simultaneously, Sheik's wiped consciousness awakened disoriented, and he realized he was inhabiting his former adult body. Standing in the middle of the mist of a mysterious field, the veteran looked around, trying to recognize the sight stained with disgrace. The calm of the environment was soon broken by the chilling grunts of mutilated zombies wandering through the shadows. Upon identifying the armor of the cursed undead, the warrior retreated, shocked to recognize his old battle companions. Facing that desolate landscape, the warrior saw his old companions walking aimlessly like hollow shells. Just then, an illuminated figure emerged in the middle of the dark field, and he immediately recognized his beloved Hannah. The woman displayed a serene countenance while she called him affectionately by his usual nickname. Relieved, the swordsman touched his wife's face, seeking comfort in that impossible reunion. But the illusion shattered violently when the corrupted form of Hannah sank her teeth into his neck with a terrifying scream. The shock made Sheik wake up with a start, breathing deeply as he realized it had all been a nightmare. Still sweating cold, the boy tried to calm his panting breath in the poorly lit room. Nearby, the maid Belle noticed the movement and called out to him, worried, seeing the confusion on his face. The young woman expressed immense relief at seeing him wake up and asked softly how his body was feeling. Feeling an uncomfortable pain, the hero grumbled, bringing his hand to his head, while the servant asked him not to strain himself. Ignoring the warning, he wanted to know immediately how many days he had been sleeping like that. Belle revealed that 2 full days had passed since the test and questioned if he remembered anything. The mention of the trial made the MC widen his eyes while putting the pieces together in his mind. Flashes of the intense battle against the giant boar and the use of his secret technique invaded his memory all at once. Returning to reality, he called the maid and asked anxiously about the fate of the undead used in that evaluation. Surprised by the sudden question, Belle repeated the words without understanding his interest in those monsters. She explained that the approved brothers and their respective undead were already in the mansion, questioning the reason for his doubt. Without giving any explanations, the hero looked away and asked dryly if Grika had managed to return. The servant confirmed that the arrogant one had been approved, highlighting that 5 people had returned alive from the forest. Deducing the situation, the hero thought it was good for the bully and supposed he had passed by sheer luck. In his thoughts, he calmed down upon confirming that Hannah's soul was still safe for the moment. Hesitating a lot, Belle broke the silence to warn with regret that only 4 people had passed and he had been failed. The news hit the boy hard, making him question indignantly what the hell that meant. Irritated, he threw it in her face that he had protected the monster until the end, and had also hunted the magical beast, not understanding Grika's success. Faced with that explosion of unknown facts, the maid blinked, perplexed, not knowing how to respond. Meanwhile, the day dawned peacefully over the imposing towers of the family's main estate. In a large, luxurious hall, the survivors received the insignias that proved their success in the mortal evaluation. Standing before the group, the family's evaluator formally congratulated the youngsters on their bloody achievement. He highlighted the extreme difficulty of that year's test and stated that the patriarch would be very satisfied with the 4 victors. Holding the proof of their triumph, Grika and the others thanked him for the recognition with smug expressions. Full of himself, the older brother laughed, guaranteeing that it had all been very easy and that he wished he had killed more. The instructor ignored the arrogance and announced a special 3-day leave for them to regain their strength and train. The reward excited those approved, leaving the bully even more conceited. The youngsters celebrated their victory and left the hall in a hurry, leaving the evaluator alone in silence. Hidden by the crack in the door, Gilgren's dark figure observed everything attentively in the darkness. Walking through the luxurious corridors, Grika laughed to himself, savoring the taste of his supposed glory. But the peace lasted little when young Helios approached, commenting on the slaughter of the I-tier beast. Caught by surprise, the smug one disguised his nervousness quickly and agreed, pretending naturalness. Suspicious, the boy questioned how he had defeated a beast that had even slaughtered the inspector, something never seen before. He even pressed him, wanting to know where so much power had come from to manage to save the life of that useless sheik. Maintaining his pose, Grika warned his rival that he wouldn't hand over his secrets on a silver platter. Without insisting, Helios shrugged, stating he didn't care much for the details of that story. Taking advantage of the gap, the faker said goodbye quickly and continued his way down the corridor. As soon as he was alone, Helios cast a sharp look and thought that blatant lie made no sense at all. In his memory, the true scene from the forest surged, where he spied on Sheik massacring the giant monster without mercy. In the hidden memory, Helios remembered having seen the true responsible party for the victory fallen, exhausted on the ground. Soon after, he observed Grika's malicious approach toward the fainted body. Without the slightest bit of mercy, the fake hero delivered a brutal kick against the defenseless boy out of pure frustration and envy. Next, a swift sword descended with force, breaking the magical chains that bound the MC to the test. Before the monster's carcass, Grika mocked him, saying that was the price for fainting in such a pathetic way. Taking possession of the zombie woman, the faker declared with mockery that he would take on the role of great savior and beast hunter. Accompanied by the undead, the trickster turned his back and left, telling his brother to go to hell right there. Back to the present, the estate's central courtyard displayed a routine and peaceful movement. Far from the celebrations, the imposing Gilgran walked with his hands behind his back through an open castle corridor. Following right behind, the evaluator questioned respectfully if that manipulated approval was really a wise attitude. He argued firmly that the title of winner shouldn't be in the hands of the arrogant boy. Showing the broken observation crystal, the inspector revealed that the stone had recorded the remaining magic after its supposed destruction. A sinister and purple energy hovered over the artifact, while the subordinate guaranteed that overwhelming power belonged to Sheik. Faced with the necromancer's frightening silence, the man stared at him, waiting for orders, and asked if he had any plan in mind. Ignoring his employee's curiosity, the patriarch just ordered coldly for him to leave the location. Overflowing with malice, the villain revealed his glowing red eye, plotting something in the dark. The narrator revealed the necromancer's thought, who found it fascinating to have a monster disguised among his children. Far from there, Greco walked full of pride near a large water fountain in the inner courtyard. Holding the insignia, he deluded himself by imagining that his mother would be extremely proud of that achievement. For a second, he remembered that Sheik would probably be furious, but decided to leave that problem for later. After all, the smug one argued that he was the one who had the proof of victory, considering the other's survival mere luck. Spotting the familiar figure from behind, the boy called out to his mother, full of enthusiasm. Running toward her, the young man raised his voice excitedly to ensure she paid attention. Full of himself, he showed the trophy on his chest and demanded she see what he had just achieved. The fake hero pointed to his own face, announcing that he had conquered the family's honor without approval. Suddenly, a devastating impact hit the boy square on, crushing his celebration in an instant. Without a chance to defend, the trickster's body was thrown into the air like a rag doll. A gigantic stake of magical ice plummeted, destroying the entire ground in a ruthless and deadly attack. In the middle of the freezing magic, his mother's furious expression emerged, showing that she wasn't happy with the situation at all. Thrown into the destroyed fountain, the fake hero coughed and wondered what the hell was happening there. Just then, Sheik approached with Belle, commenting that the chat seemed very interesting and asked to participate as well. The protagonist stared at Greco with a threatening look, calling his older brother with a voice loaded with irony. Completely in shock at the boy's presence, the bully could barely react and deny the situation. Maintaining his intimidating posture, Sheik demanded to hear the wonderful stories he was telling. He repeated the call to his brother in an even darker tone, increasing the tension in the air. Trapped in the cold water, the coward stuttered, desperate, unable to articulate a whole sentence. Before everyone in the castle courtyard, the hero made a long pause, waiting for an answer. Watching from afar, Helios and the other youngsters recognized the boy and were impressed by the appearance. Sitting on the edge of the fountain in a relaxed way, Sheik questioned why his brother had suddenly gone mute. Naturally, he lamented having been failed right after trying so hard to take down an A-tier beast. Trying to disguise the evident nervousness, Greco replied cynically that was indeed a shame. The falseness exhausted the hero's patience, who cursed him as a wretch for having stolen all the credit from the forest. In a deadly tone, the protagonist warned that the trickster's fate would depend a lot on his next answer. Terrified, the liar retreated into the water, denying everything, and told him to stop with those unfounded accusations. The bully gained a little courage and shouted demanding proof, stating that above all else, it was his word against the hero's. Without the slightest patience for the theater, Sheik landed a devastating kick directly on the liar's face. With the violent impact, the fake hero's body was thrown with force through the air. He fell clumsily into the shallow part of the fountain, whimpering in pain with his hands on his head. The protagonist ignored the crying and just questioned ironically if his brother's excuse was just that. Walking through the water, he warned that if Greco had begged for forgiveness, he would have left alive, but now he had chosen death. The dark warning made the trickster tremble and beg his brother to wait a little. Desperate, Belle ran toward the fountain and asked her young master to stop that. The servant warned that it was strictly forbidden to kill within the family, even in a place where strength dictated the rules. Hearing the clan's rules, the coward realized the loophole and agreed quickly with the maid. Greco showed the approval crest on his chest and went back to acting with arrogance in the face of imminent danger. He pointed his finger in the hero's face, stating that a failure without an insignia could only fight in an official duel. The information excited Sheik, who deduced quickly that a duel would allow him to kill his opponent without breaking rules. His brother went into despair, trying to deny that interpretation, but the protagonist already advanced, satisfied. Grabbing Greco by the collar, he demanded the coward bet the insignia immediately and accept the duel to resolve everything at once. Trying to flee from certain death, the bully cringed, sweating cold, and invented the excuse of being very tired. Suddenly, his mother approached furiously and ordered her son to accept the challenge to prove the power of their lineage. She stated with pride that a winner capable of defeating an A-tier beast wouldn't have the slightest problem there. Pressured by his own mother, the liar tried to explain himself desperate, but was soon interrupted. Without giving time for more excuses, Sheik grabbed his brother's face and pushed him violently downward. Trying to breathe, Greco struggled in the water and begged once more for the attack to stop. Ruthless, the hero questioned if the great approved one was really going to run from the fight, as it was supposed to be easy. The trickster was pulled to the surface, coughing a lot, and refused the fight with the little voice he had left. Faced with the stubborn refusal, the protagonist plunged his brother's head with even more brutality into the cold water. The coward released bubbles of despair while his oxygen ran out under the weight of the hero's hand. Watching the vexation, the woman shouted impatiently, demanding that her son get up and retaliate against the attack. From afar, the other boys observed the scene, tense, realizing that Sheik's aggressiveness had crossed the limits. The maid watched the torture, apprehensive, fearing the consequences of her young master's actions. Standing over his drowned brother, the boy admitted in silence that his cruel attitude was truly humiliating. With a cold and red look, he recognized that he was losing his own reason entirely, moved by hatred. In the depth of his mind, he blamed himself harshly, remembering his honorable title from the past. The protagonist knew very well that torturing a useless boy wasn't worthy of a true swordmaster. However, he reflected that he didn't have the strength to face the Necromancer yet, needing to get closer to discover his secrets. The corrupted image of Hannah passed through his head, reinforcing that securing the spot with the enemy was her only salvation. Bringing the trickster up, he gave a final ultimatum, asking if the choice would be the duel or death in the fountain. Coughing desperately, the fake hero spat out the water accumulated in his lungs, fighting for his life. Totally destroyed by fear, the arrogant one finally yielded and accepted the terms of the official confrontation. At that moment, a wooden sword nailed itself with force into the courtyard floor, interrupting the discussion. Nearby, Helios appeared, holding his own weapon, and warned seriously that commotion was over. The surprise intervention caught the hero's attention, who stared at the newcomer with quite some suspicion. Descending the steps toward the water, the young man imposed presence, while Sheik noticed he hadn't felt his approach. Analyzing the boy's firm posture, the protagonist tried to pull from his memory who exactly that extra was. Upon seeing help arrive, Grika opened a relieved smile and called his colleague's name as if it were his salvation. Ignoring the coward's joy, Helios kept his gaze fixed and unshakable against the monster's true assassin. Pointing his sword at the protagonist, the boy stated he had no idea what he was trying to achieve there. Perceiving the lack of murderous intent in the newcomer, the hero asked with irony if he intended to play the peacemaker. The young man denied the good guy role firmly and went straight to the point, questioning if it was Sheik who had taken down the giant beast. Finding amusement in the direct suspicion, the protagonist provoked his rival, asking if he was going to receive some kind of compliment. The evasive answer functioned as a clear confirmation for the young man, who just agreed in silence. Without the slightest respect for his arrogant colleague, Helios guaranteed it would be impossible for an incompetent like Grika to perform such a feat. Revealing his own approval crest, he decided to accept the hero's challenge in the coward's place. A magical gale circled the courtyard while the newcomer assumed his combat stance, releasing energy. Thirsty for a real fight, he invited the protagonist to the bout, alleging that the official evaluation had been too boring. The adversary's imposing confidence pleased the swordmaster, who demonstrated excitement with the new opportunity. Frightened by the turn of events, Grika warned, trembling, that Helios was lethal and that a failure could never beat him. Sheik turned his face with coldness, making it clear he didn't care who the opponent was, as long as he got the insignia in the end. A strong excitement took over the protagonist's posture, who prepared to show his true repressed strength. A colossal blue aura overflowed from his body, creating a crater of power in the water and impressing everyone around. With his eyes glowing intensely, he warned that he was already getting very frustrated by only dealing with pathetic opponents. Provoking the rival without mana, Helios asked to be entertained, but the hero told him to shut his mouth and attack once and for all. With sword in hand, Helios accepted the challenge willingly. Enveloped by green energy, he proposed they resolve everything in a duel, calling the protagonist manaless. Facing the rival firmly, the young man asked Sheik to try to at least make that fight interesting. The provocation only excited the hero, who released a colossal aura. He warned it would be fun, since he was tired of crushing weak opponents. While the two energies collided in the courtyard, the green aura boy called his adversary to combat and told him not to make him wait. Before the bout began, Bell hurried toward the two, begging them to stop immediately. The servant stopped in the middle of the path, panting, while her young master called her by name. Without much patience, the protagonist told the girl to retreat and not get in his way, but she refused firmly. Just then, the maid explained that she couldn't allow the fight there. She warned that a duel involving insignias needed to happen in an official arena to be validated. Finding the rule a big bore, the swordmaster suggested they just resolve everything right there in the courtyard. However, Helios agreed with the servant. He warned that breaking the rules would result in the immediate exile of both, regardless of who won. Frustrated with the bureaucracy, Sheik clicked his tongue and complained that the members of that family were too much trouble. The disrespectful comment offended Helios deeply, who gripped his sword hilt, indignant at the boy's audacity. With his gaze glowing with fury, the young man declared that insolence alone was motive enough for the hero's death. A little later, intense flames ignited, illuminating the walls of a closed and dark environment. Their footsteps echoed through the stone corridor as they descended toward the blood-stained courtyard. In the center of the underground arena, Helios was already positioned with his magical energy flowing intensely. Walking calmly, the protagonist entered the location, followed closely by his faithful maid. Upon passing some skulls on the ground, he noticed the scenery and commented ironically if that was really such an official space. Observing the dark and destroyed vastness of the place, the hero decreed that it looked like just a dirty arena. Very worried about the situation, Bill begged her young master to be careful and not strain himself beyond his limit. She warned that Helios was one of the strongest brothers in the family, known for ruthlessly slaughtering any monster or human he faced. The servant revealed that the patriarch had recognized the lad's talent very early on, allowing him to participate in advanced missions at just 8 years old. The adversary's violent record didn't intimidate Sheik, who opened an animated smile, foreseeing the fight would be quite fun. Swallowing hard, the girl maintained a tense posture and warned that there was still one more dark detail about the opponent. With a trembling voice, she said he was called the Reaper of the White Rose due to his swordsmanship being so fast that he decapitated victims before they could even scream. Clasping her own hands in despair, the servant finished her warning, begging once more for the hero to be careful. Finding the nickname a joke, Sheik cracked his knuckles and promised to crush his adversary into the ground, no matter the color of the rose. Suddenly, the heavy sound of gears echoed through the hall while the huge upper gate of the arena began to open. The unexpected movement caught the protagonist's attention, who lifted his gaze, confused, toward the ceiling. Immediately, a gigantic structure full of stakes descended with brutality, revealing a new observation area in the arena. The metal plates retracted completely, showing a large grandstand built around the entire battlefield. Faced with the luxurious scenery hidden there, the hero found humor in the family's exaggerated effort to set up that entire structure. Without losing focus on his real goal, the protagonist hurried his adversary to start the fight once and for all. On the other side, the green energy intensified around Helios, creating magical roots that whipped the air. Maintaining his cold posture, the young man accused the hero of not knowing his own place and asked if he was really ready to die. Stretching his neck with disdain, Sheik mocked the rival's attitude and warned that he would call him an idiot for the rest of his life if he won. The threat of humiliation infuriated the lad, who promised to shut the insolent one's mouth forever. Meanwhile, in the grandstand, the other youngsters watched, incredulous, judging the protagonist for risking exile in an impossible fight. At that instant, the spectators' murmuring was interrupted by a frightened silence upon noticing an imposing presence arriving. The fearsome Necromancer entered the observation area with his hands on his waist, exuding his usual oppressive aura. Noticing the illustrious arrival, Helios immediately lifted his eyes and recognized his father in shock. In the back, the cowards Greeka and Grio trembled, kneeling on the ground, terrified by the patriarch's surprise visit. Demanding respect for their master, the family's evaluator asked for absolute silence from everyone in the arena. Fixing his furious gaze on the box, the swordmaster finally found the target of his mortal hatred. Totally submissive to his father's power, Helios abandoned his combat stance and knelt in a sign of respect. Commanding the situation, the villain opened a malicious smile and declared that he wanted to see what the boy was capable of. Without lowering his head, Sheik drilled the Necromancer with his eyes, knowing that fight was just a step to reach his revenge. Focused on the mission, the hero promised himself that he would rip every dark secret from the patriarch and save her at any cost. Just then, the bootlicking assistant leaned over and asked if the master would like to ring the bell to give start to the entertainment. Agreeing with the idea, Gilgrand manifested a purple energy in his hand and told the combatants to enjoy the fight to the fullest. The magic orb was launched from the box and fell quickly toward the center of the dark arena. As soon as the orb touched the ground signaling the start, Helios took momentum and fired against the protagonist without hesitation. Without showing the slightest concern, the hero just opened a confident smile following the enemy's swift approach. Enveloped by the magical roots, the Reaper of the White Rose advanced, cutting the air in a fulminating attack. Noticing the trajectory of the blade, Sheik noted quickly that the opponent was aiming directly at his head to finish it off. With an agile movement, he raised his sword and blocked the heavy blow, calling the lad impatient. Deflecting the force of the impact, the hero provoked the rival, asking if he was that desperate to show off for his father. The impact of the block forced Helios to retreat with an acrobatic leap, landing a few meters away. Shocked by the perfect defense, the adversary realized that the hero had managed to counterattack without losing a single second. Taking advantage of the opening in the retreat, the swordmaster advanced and landed a violent blow against the lad's defense. Maintaining the pressure in the hand-to-hand combat, the hero mocked, asking if the enemy had some kink for necks. Watching the brutal exchange of blows, the youngsters in the grandstand were open-mouthed, unable to believe that that was really the family's useless one. Feeling cornered, Helios exploded his mana in a greenish shockwave to try to push the protagonist away. Rebutting the provocation, the lad denied furiously any preference for decapitating him in that way. The Reaper guaranteed with hatred that his only desire now was to rip that cheeky tongue out of the hero's mouth. Shortly after, the spectators noticed a different energy shining in the arena and went into shock upon seeing the yellow mana. Revealing an absurd control, Sheik manifested his own aura, containing the power perfectly at level 4. With amplified attributes, the hero dodged a frantic sequence of magic cuts with extreme ease. Using the agility of his refined body, he did a backflip and landed smoothly on a destroyed pillar. Sticking the blade into the ground to maintain his balance, the boy displayed sparks of pure energy around his weapon. He analyzed the battlefield in absolute silence, calculating the next movements of the desperate opponent. The war veteran recognized that the kid's magic control was excellent and that his aggressive strategy was ideal for someone talented. Admitting that the lad's level wasn't bad at all, the protagonist opened a small smile, ready to turn the game around. Immediately, a violent storm of reddish energy exploded from the hero's body, dominating the entire space. Bathed in power, he questioned in a threatening way if that cute fighting style would work against someone of equivalent strength. Bathed in his own colossal aura, Sheik provoked his rival, calling him the hysterical boy of the White Rose, and ordered him to advance once and for all. From high up in the arena, the spectators followed the growth of the tension that dominated the battlefield completely. Confident in his power, the hero wondered if that cute fighting style would work against someone of the same level 4. Maintaining the mocking tone, the protagonist cursed the adversary and demanded a direct confrontation immediately. In the grandstand, the youngsters went into shock upon noticing that the supposed useless one had reached the 4th magical stage. Grika and the other bullies began to sweat cold, terrified by the boy also possessing such destructive power. Meanwhile, a heavy silence took over the main box, where the patriarch watched everything, paying quite a bit of attention. Observing the fight, Gilgrand demonstrated excitement at the participants' unexpected display of strength. Shortly after, the Necromancer changed his attitude and concluded coldly that that wasn't all the boy had to offer. Quite intrigued, he demanded in thought that the hero reveal the true magnitude of the power he was hiding. Down there, Helios stared at his adversary, completely stunned and unable to say a word in the face of that magic. Confused by the revelation, the lad questioned indignantly for what reason the protagonist had also reached the 4th degree. Putting the pieces together, he deduced the unthinkable and asked, shocked, if the opponent had also received the patriarch's special blessing. Faced with that bizarre theory, the swordmaster was left understanding absolutely nothing about what that power was. Finding everything a big load of nonsense, the hero floated lightly and asked with irony if someone had said a prayer for the rival. As the lad just lowered his head, frustrated, Sheik deduced he had lost all desire to talk. However, envy dominated Helios, who refused to accept the situation and muttered about being the only one chosen by the Lord. Taken by fury, the young man stated with quite a bit of hatred and obsession that only he possessed that right in the family. With that, the Reaper's greenish magical energy exploded aggressively throughout the dark environment. Immediately, enormous glowing roots emerged from the ground and began to surround the hero from every side. Demonstrating pure superiority, the protagonist commented with contempt that those squirming tentacles were very disgusting. Losing his patience for good, the adversary advanced ferociously, decreeing the insolent boy's death. Using all his physical strength, the combatant leaped to land a devastating blow from top to bottom. A colossal blade of green energy descended, tearing the air directly in the direction of the swordmaster. The two clashed their weapons brutally, starting a quick and intense exchange of attacks in the center of the underground arena. Watching the extreme aggressiveness of the confrontation, the faithful maid called out to her young master, completely terrified. Dodging the barrage of blows, the hero used his own magical energy to protect himself from the precise cuts. While he retreated skillfully, he noted that the enemy focused on quick attacks, utilizing the minimum of reformulated mana. On the other hand, he reflected that his own essence was leaking too much, which would leave him at a disadvantage in a long battle. Landing safely, the warrior decided he couldn't use his classic fencing style in front of that lineage. Recognizing the danger of the situation, he concluded quickly that that wasn't the ideal moment to just be playing around. Even so, the protagonist positioned himself for the bout, noting an intriguing familiarity in the rival's technique. Pulling from his memory, he realized the movement resembled his old hunting hound cage technique and decided to test copying it. Taking advantage of the gap, Helios advanced again, surrounded by roots, and accused the swordmaster of being slow in his reflexes. Delivering a violent horizontal attack, the young man questioned rudely where all that arrogance from before had gone. At the same moment, a massive wave of greenish energy exploded in the air with the clear intention of crushing the target. With agility, the hero expanded his own magic to manage to withstand the heavy impact of the enemy's blow. The constant clashing of weapons created strong rumbles, while the protagonist rebutted every aggressive onslaught from the Reaper. Dodging the danger by a hair's breadth, the boy showed off pure confidence, proving he remained in control of the situation. From high in the exclusive box, the family's patriarch continued to follow every detail of the brawl in absolute silence. Completely panting on the ground, Helios muttered his father's name, trying desperately to recover his lost breath. Overcome by his sick obsession, he warned that he was the only one deserving of the blessing, and refused to hand his position over to his opponent. Observing the lad's deplorable state, Sheik was indignant that he was so submissive to a wretch like the Necromancer. Without listening to common sense, Helios concentrated all his remaining strength to try to decree the definitive end of the battle. The excessive glow of the magic obscured the adversary's face, who was willing to risk his own life for his status in the house. With a scream taken by rage, he leaped and launched a crushing spell from top to bottom, aiming at the protagonist's head. The brutal attack descended, tearing the air, forcing the hero to cross his blade to withstand the absurd pressure of the roots. Facing the rival's fury, the swordmaster confirmed and thought that his deduction about the fight was correct. A memory of his past life surged in his mind, where he obliterated entire armies using pure skill. Returning to the violent reality, the warrior concluded calmly that he had always resolved his worst problems in that exact way. Full of determination, the boy decreed that there was no need to think about trivialities when brute force resolved everything. A colossal amount of energy explodes from their body, completely destabilizing the enemy's formation. The violent backlash of the magical impact sends Helios flying backward as he cries out from the force of the strike. Landing awkwardly in the arena, he grips his weapon in shock, struggling to process what just happened. In the upper stands, the extreme brilliance of the magic blinds the spectators, leaving them disoriented by such raw power. Trembling with worry, the maid watches the dust settle, calling out softly for the warrior. Meanwhile, the patriarch simply releases a sound of deep satisfaction, confirming that his suspicions were correct from the start of the test. In the center of the ruined courtyard, pure mana begins to materialize into a solid form around the MC's sword. The terrifying overflow of vitality creates a golden storm, completely redefining the local gravity and atmosphere. Open-mouthed, the cowards above try to comprehend the divine form the energy has taken. With a ruthless gaze, the MC tells his rival to shut his mouth and warns that he is about to prune the thorns of that white rose. The magic condenses into a gigantic, cross-shaped blade, creating crushing pressure across the entire battlefield. Completely paralyzed by terror, Helios stutters, unable to fathom the monstrosity of that simple piece of wood. Absorbing the adversary's dread, the hero maintains his brilliant offensive stance, preparing to finish the intense clash. Focused on his stationary target, he reinforces his previous threat, promising to cut all enemy magical tricks at the root. Ultimate despair takes hold of the Reaper, who widens his eyes, realizing there's nowhere left to hide. With a violent impulse, the swordmaster swings his improvised weapon, releasing all the accumulated energy into the air. The blinding light reflects off the terrified young man's face, who murmurs in shock, unable to believe it is real. The giant golden blade cuts through space relentlessly, striking the greenish defenses with incalculable force. The instantaneous impact generates a massive explosion, causing the base of the arena to collapse and tossing the weaklings aside. Clinging to the guardrails, the onlookers shout in a mix of awe and terror at this divine display of strength. Shaking uncontrollably, the little maid becomes suspicious of the identity of the boy she has cared for all her life and calls out to him, frightened. Through the dense curtain of smoke, the MC reappears unharmed, his eyes exuding a yellow aura. The scene of absolute destruction is fully revealed, showing a giant crater in the shattered ground. Hanging in the air by his own shattered magical tentacles, Helios is called a failure by the hero due to his sloppy technique. Still hanging by his own roots, Helios asks in disbelief if his opponent really copied his technique in the middle of the fight. Maintaining an imposing posture, Sheik tells the boy not to brag, asserting that he is the true predator here. To top off the insult, the hero calls his opponent a simple weed. Completely furious at the mockery, the Reaper expands his greenish magic, wanting to put things to the test. With that, he launches a storm of tentacles for the MC to see who the real garbage is. Forcing his mana to the limit, the combatant fires the attack with pure lethal intent. Blocking everything effortlessly, the warrior mocks that weeds are stubborn and always grow back. To solve the problem once and for all, he swings his giant sword, warning that he will pull him out by the root. A colossal golden slash tears through the arena, completely destroying the magical onslaught. Feeling the damage from the impact, Helios grumbles that his rival attacks with brute force and zero technique. After the destructive clash, the MC lands softly in the center of the shattered courtyard. Faced with imminent defeat, the boy focuses his vision and calls out the patriarch's name. From the top of the exclusive box, Gilgran continues to watch the massacre with his arms crossed. Noticing the master's gaze, his opponent panics, thinking his attention has been stolen. Overcome by dread, he cries, wondering if the Necromancer has abandoned him in favor of the family's useless one. Refusing to accept this brutal reality, the Reaper sheds tears, stating he will not allow this. Gritting his teeth in pure rage, he murmurs again that he would never let such a situation occur. Obsession takes over, and the boy tries to convince himself that he is the only one worthy of that favor. Facing his opponent through the smoke, the enemy guarantees aloud that the Necromancer only needs him. Without understanding the level of that sick fanaticism, the Swordmaster looks up, quite confused. Suddenly, Helios's eyes turn black, and he screams that he is the only one permitted to stay by the Lord's side. Surprised by the frightening change, Sheik steps back and tries to analyze the situation. Agony takes hold of the boy as purple magical spikes explode from within his own chest. Analyzing the oppressive color of that mana, the hero soon begins to connect the dots. Covered by the dark aura, his adversary proudly declares that he can merge with Gilgran. The mutation distorts his entire body, and he celebrates the fact that he was the chosen vessel. With an expression of pure disgust, the MC finally understands what that blessing really was. With his mind corrupted by external magic, the combatant can barely babble the master's name. The expansion of power tears his skin even further, forcing him to let out a scream of absolute pain. Dominated by uncontrollable fury, the monster howls the warrior's name, ready to attack. Wrapped in chains of chaotic energy, the creature advances, growling that he will finish off the MC. Agile as always, the hero raises his blade just in time to block a stunning green strike. Feeling the brutal force of the attack pushing him back, the boy clicks his tongue in pure frustration. Sweating from the excessive pressure, he notes that the Lord injected a power that the young man's body cannot even handle. Connecting the clues, the warrior realizes that the Patriarch uses humans for his experiments, just as he did with the magical beast. The magics collide fiercely, generating sparks that illuminate the darkness of the arena. With a look of compassion, Sheik warns that the thorns have corrupted even the adversary's soul. Extremely offended by the pity, Helios rails that those marks are a true medal of honor. While launching desperate strikes, the corrupted youth raves, saying that the curse represents the Lord's love. The sick fanaticism causes bloody roots to tear through his body tissues even more. Hearing such nonsense, the Swordmaster maintains his serious expression and warns that he is completely mistaken. Repelling the assault with mastery, the hero states that the boy had enough talent to reach the top on his own. Pressing their crossed swords, he praises the enemy's skill, saying that there was the potential of a noble swordsman in him. The weight of disappointment surfaces in Sheik's voice as he points out that his opponent threw it all away to soil himself like that. Completely blinded by devotion, the monster demands silence and screams that he sacrificed everything for the Necromancer. Bathed in his own blinding light, Sheik vows to prune that cursed white rose once and for all. With a precise jump, the warrior concentrates all his power into a perfect ascending strike. The golden blade finds its target easily, opening a deep gash in the creature's chest. Watching the damage, the hero warns that it is time for a trim so the youth can restart with a clean slate. The continuous impact purifies the black magic, violently tearing the corrupted roots from Helios' skin. After the purge, the Swordmaster calmly advises his opponent to pull himself together and try to evolve. Without the energy to stay on his feet, the Reaper collapses, defeated, while the victor sheaths his rustic sword. The crowd of extras stutters in shock, unable to believe the fall of the favorite. With the fight finished, the assistant bows deeply, thanking the Lord for supervising the test. Uninterested in the defeated trash, the Necromancer turns his back and calmly leaves the box. Down below, the MC lifts his head and stares at the empty seat with bloodlust. The residual aura still floats around his body as rage consumes his mind. Focusing on his main goal, the boy promises himself that he will slice through the Patriarch without mercy. Far from the hero's eyes, Gilgran walks through the shadows, displaying a sadistic smile of pure satisfaction. In the center of the shattered courtyard, the family's useless one breathes deeply beside his knocked-out opponent. Approaching the injured combatant, the boy crouches down to retrieve his evaluation reward. Agilely, his hand reaches for the golden emblem dropped beside the sprawled body. Tossing the medal into the air as if it were a toy, the hero takes his leave, confirming his promotion. Lying in a pool of his own blood, the defeated fanatic sadly babbles the master's name. Without the strength to react, he stays on the ground, just trying to process his own complete failure. Before departing for good, the warrior casts one last glance, recommending that his brother live by his own ideals. Next, he calmly walks down the steps and abandons the ruined battlefield. Waiting near the exit, the assistant congratulates the young master on his enlistment in the lower-class unit. With a professional smile, the man guarantees that he will send instructions later and asks the victor to rest. Detesting the servants of that house, the swordmaster tells the man to mind his own business and continues on his way. As soon as he is far enough away, the MC loses his breath and falls to his knees in the dark corridor. Feeling his body burning with pain, he recognizes that the rebound from the forced use of magic is unavoidable. Physical and mental exhaustion take their toll quickly, making his vision spin. Unable to keep himself up, the boy curses in frustration as his body falls backward. Just before hitting his head on the stone floor, the loyal maid supports him gently with a warm embrace. Waking from the fainting spell, Sheik opens his eyes, surprised, and calls out softly for the maid. Relieved to see him awake, Belle thanks him for the young master's effort. 3 days after the violent duel, heavy rain falls over the large family mansion. With the melancholy weather outside, the palace corridors remain empty and silent. In the darkened library, the MC closes a book, frustrated by not finding anything there either. He observes the corridor filled with shells and concludes that he has already searched all the files in the place. Despite all his effort, the boy has found no clues about the secret of the Patriarch's power. Even though he has reached the starting line to expose that mystery, the lack of direction leaves him completely lost. With his gaze fixed on the paper, the warrior hopes that something will appear soon to serve as a breakthrough in this investigation. Suddenly, 3 guys enter the library and mock the fact that he is reading alone in such a place. Clearly bothered by the interruption, the swordmaster asks what they want and mutters about the impending headache. The group leader comments on the rumor that Sheik won by pure luck and warns that they have come to test his skills. Surrounded by the bullies, the boy laments that that house only has cowards willing to fight at a numerical disadvantage. Finding the situation amusing, the invader states that defeating the one who beat the favorite will bring them much prestige. Taken by greed, the 3 release their magic at the same time and order their victim to die immediately. Full of confidence, the leader screams, ordering his partners to advance with everything they have. In the blink of an eye, Sheik moves and violently grabs 2 of the adversaries by their hair. Without giving them time to react, the hero smashes the face of one of them straight into the wooden table. Using the momentum, he lands a stunning punch on the other partner, neutralizing the threat in an instant. Fallen on the floor defeated, the aggressors realize the opponent's true strength, but the boy only mocks the group's weakness. Dusting off his hands, the MC leaves the fight, stating that something so boring is not his style. Preferring a fair fight, the swordmaster decides that he will find a clue by acting directly head-on. Before leaving, he orders the failures to clean up the whole mess in exchange for his forgiveness, but something interrupts the moment. Near the entrance door, a voice calls for the young master, causing him to turn his head, startled. It is little Belle, who reveals she has searched for him everywhere and is relieved to find him there. Upset by the boy's indifferent tone, the maid questions his way of speaking but soon apologizes for the delay. Changing the subject, she warns that Gilgran has summoned him to pass on an official order and asks for haste. A heavy aura surrounds Sheik's body, and he murmurs in satisfaction for finally having gained the Necromancer's attention. With his gaze overflowing with pure hatred, the warrior accepts the summons without hesitating for even a second. Walking through the corridors shortly after, he thinks about how this is the perfect opportunity to get close to his target. Heading toward the Patriarch's quarters, the boy crosses the luxurious wing of the palace. One of the soldiers on the way notices the newcomer's presence and whispers his name. With that, the boy's companions laugh and mock Sheik, accusing him of cheating to pass the test. Without caring at all about the futile provocations, the hero continues walking straight and leaves the clowns talking to themselves. However, the swordmaster shifts his attention slightly to analyze that silent warrior who did not participate in the teasing. The young man remains motionless, holding the sheath of his sword, demonstrating a posture quite different from the other idiots. Recording the situation in his memory, the MC refocuses on the main path without interrupting his walk. Intrigued by the brief eye contact, he realizes that there is something quite peculiar about that cloaked youth. The warrior concludes internally that the subject's energy is strange and that he is hiding some kind of secret. Arriving at the main room, the assistant opens the huge front doors and invites the visitor to enter. The family patriarch waits sitting on the throne, while the servant congratulates Sheik for his work in the duel. Getting straight to the point, the man in glasses announces that there is a mandatory mission for the new soldier of the lower unit. Facing the two head-on with tranquility, the young man tells them to speak up about what it involves. Reading the papers, the subordinate reveals the order to defend the frozen ruins of Historia for 6 months without interruption. Shocked by the distance of the location, the MC questions why he will not be serving in missions near the Lord. Calmly, the assistant explains that the promise to serve alongside the Necromancer still exists, but that the current priority is different. Feeling like he's being played for a fool, the hero grinds his teeth and grumbles, demanding they stop with this nonsense. Full of rage, he argues that this is the same as exile and that being thrown into a distant place ruins his plans. Cutting off the annoying complaints, the servant reveals that after 6 months, there will be a ritual focused on expanding the Lord's power absolutely. The word ritual catches the swordmaster by surprise, lighting an instinctive alert in his attentive mind. The subordinate informs that, because of this great preparation, the patriarch will be completely away from the front line in the meantime. The real task requires subduing the magical beasts of the frigid region and eliminating any danger before the secret ceremony. Analyzing the great opportunity behind this dangerous trip, the MC decides that it is worth facing the challenge. Breaking the superior silence, Gilgran promises that he will give him a position in his personal guard as soon as the boy finishes the mission. The villain displays his habitual sadistic smile as he questions whether the new condition pleases the combatant. Intrigued by the seductive proposal, the boy repeats the master's words, weighing the enormous benefit this would bring. Finishing the tactical meeting, the assistant instructs the youth to find the middle-class unit that is already garrisoning the area. Offering a formal ballot of obligation, the MC concludes that this villain's whim actually worked in his favor. He accepts the order aloud, but inside he swears to make the Necromancer bitterly regret that offer. Sometime after the agreement, a carriage advances slowly through the devastated landscape covered in thick snow. Facing the brutal weather outside, the coachman warns that the wheels cannot advance any further and that the journey ends there. Excited to stretch her legs, the maid takes an awkward leap, abandoning the interior of the rustic vehicle. As soon as she sinks her boots into the deep snow, the girl hugs her own body, grumbling about the freezing temperature. Bundled up and ready to continue, Sheik asks why she insisted on coming, ensuring he would have solved everything without company. Offended, Belle says he is mean and decrees that her duty as a maid requires her to serve until the very last dramatic instant. The conductor interrupts their silly conversation, informing them that they have arrived at the northern outskirts of the kingdom and that the destination is near. Wishing them a safe trip back, the girl thanks him, while the carriage turns sideways to depart for good. Amazed by the shimmer around them, the maid is quickly distracted and admires the silver landscape for the first time in her life. The enchantment is short-lived, as she calls for the young master, thinking he is sick because she sees smoke coming from her own mouth. Ignoring the squire's naivety, the warrior directs his focused gaze to the dark horizon far in the distance. Taking the lead to take a shortcut, Belle points to the clear trail and summons the boy to start walking. A few meters after the excitement, the effort takes its toll and the girl becomes breathless, dragging her knees through the heavy snow. Exhausted and totally without strength, she collapses in the blizzard while the MC mocks the fake energy shown earlier that afternoon. Trembling frighteningly, she asks for forgiveness for the miscalculation and receives the dry advice to protect her lungs against the merciless wind. Evaluating the terrible walking conditions and the group's lack of resistance, the swordmaster decides to set up camp right there. That same night, the pair manages to set up a campfire to ward off the mortal cold. Warming her hands near the flames, the maid sighs in relief, stating that she finally feels alive again. Observing her naivety, Sheik warns that underestimating nature there will result in instant death. Belle agrees and tries to start a conversation, asking if this is also the boy's first time on a snowy mountain. Distracted, the MC confirms, while thinking that it is actually his 12th time. With that, Belle, seeing that he is rummaging, Distracted, the MC confirms, while thinking, but the MC pulls out a huge coat and throws it at the girl. However, she tries to return it, justifying that she brought it so the young master wouldn't get sick. Without patience for fuss, the hero returns the clothing, telling her to wrap herself in it and go to sleep. Surprised by the protective attitude disguised as coldness, Belle only murmurs the boy's title. The freezing wind continues to punish the icy mountains outside the makeshift shelter. Near the warm campfire, the squire sleeps deeply and in total safety. Guarding the entrance, the swordmaster deduces that the girl does not know that the region is infested with magical beasts. Besides the monsters, he evaluates that a combat faction called the Kurzik tribe must also use that location as a base. Known to the underworld, these criminals engage in arms trafficking and the kidnapping of women and children. The warrior remembers perfectly that the trademark of this cruel band is masks with frightening designs. Connecting the pieces, he concludes that the elimination of risk factors required in the mission refers precisely to that group. Suddenly, the warrior's instincts go off, signaling that there is something approaching from outside. Without hesitating, he throws himself to the side in a quick dodge. An arrow violently pierces the stone floor exactly where the boy was standing. Analyzing the projectile stuck in the rock, the MC notices that the weapon is wrapped in mana. With a threatening look, he understands immediately that this is not an attack made by a magical beast. Soon after, a rain of arrows bombards the hideout, forcing the hero to jump into the middle of the blizzard. While dodging the constant shots, Sheik notes that the enemy's military coordination is excellent. Positioned strategically, the shooters fire non-stop, trying to corner their target. Tired of running, the boy advances like lightning, heading straight for the enemy's front line. Covering the distance in an instant, he prepares his blade to slice the nearest shooter. Seeing death up close, the aggressor throws his weapon to the ground and raises his hands, begging for surrender. Stopping the strike at the last second, the hero notices that the guy is not wearing a mask and demands to know who he is. Changing his attitude, the man smiles cynically, revealing that he is from the same unit and that it was all just a prank. Completely lost by the lame excuse, the rookie tries to process what he just heard. Before the conversation can advance, heavy footsteps sink into the snow while a voice praises the newcomer's capability. Mounted on horseback, an imposing woman emerges from the storm, apologizing for the subordinate's aggressive reception. She introduces herself as the captain of the mid-level unit, Puri Proud, and welcomes the expendable pawn. The MC remains in total silence, staring at the squadron leader with coldness. Bothered by his attitude, the woman draws her sword, calling the boy arrogant for not responding. Giving a mocking smile, Sheik bats away the insult by asking who the real arrogant one is. Provoking her further, he mocks the fact that her brother lost pathetically to someone like him. Unshaken, the commander confirms that she is Helios's biological sister and that she already knows everything about the recent duel. Defiantly, the swordmaster questions if she came seeking revenge because of her defeated relative. Puri denies it immediately, stating that weakness is a sin and that her brother was beaten for being too weak. In the middle of the tension, the little maid wakes from her sleep and sticks her head out of the hideout. The unit's shooters notice that the girl has woken up and keep watching her movements. Scared to see that band of armed warriors surrounding the location, Bell panics. The leader judges the hero for bringing a nanny to the battlefield, but he only responds that the girl followed him alone. Recognizing the captain in the middle of the snow, the squire stutters, asking what she is doing so far from home. With the situation cleared up, the group joins forces and begins to march together through the mountains the next day. Walking in the rear, Bell questions him curiously about all the confusion that happened during the early morning. The boy dodges the question quickly, guaranteeing that absolutely nothing important happened. Hearing the conversation, the captain teases the girl, asking if she is feeling very cold on the trip. Suddenly, the snow beneath the squadron's feet cracks in half, causing a violent tremor on the surface. Almost losing her balance, the maid screams desperately, thinking they are in the middle of an earthquake. Breaking the ice, a gigantic magical beast emerges from the ground, tossing debris in every direction. Acting quickly, Sheik pulls the maid by her coat to save her while complaining about the sudden attack. Unlike the group, the commander smiles excitedly, considering the monster's appearance to be a perfect moment. Facing the rookie, she demands to see the true strength of the one who stole her brother's spot. Pulling his sword from his waist, the MC questions with disdain why he should obey that order. Imposingly, the warrior reminds him that she is his official superior and needs to evaluate if the recruit has any military utility. Furious at the presence of the humans, the huge metallic snake opens its mouth in a deafening roar. The leader threatens to deport him for desertion if he refuses to fight, deeply irritating the young combatant. Tired of that arrogant woman's demands, the hero accepts the challenge and tells her to pay close attention. The giant serpent rises, blocking the sun as it prepares its mortal strike against the intruder. The beast attacks with its tail, crushing the snow, but the MC dodges easily, jumping far away. Watching the escape, the captain mocks him, asking if he is just going to dodge and accuses him of being all talk. Irritated by the supervision in the middle of combat, she tells the woman to shut her mouth and stay still. Taking advantage of the human distraction, the serpent advances fiercely, trying to devour its target in one go. Blocking the frontal onslaught with his blade, the boy demands that his superior watch everything in silence. The impact drags the hero backward while the sword grinds without being able to penetrate the creature's armor. The warrior explains that those metallic scales have properties similar to titanium to retain heat in extreme cold. She emphasizes that normal strength will never cut through that protection and asks with irony what he intends to do. Thanking her for the boring lesson, the rookie accumulates electrical energy in his body and jumps, ready for the counteroffensive. Analyzing the advanced technique, Piri realizes that the boy concentrated mana in his legs to maximize damage while spending little. Impressed with his absolute control of energy, the commander admits that his promotion was well-deserved. Moving at an absurd speed, the Swordmaster delivers a sequence of lightning attacks all over the beast's body. Suffering multiple superficial cuts, the creature shakes its head and roars in pure pain. The captain praises the tactic of attacking the parts where the monster's armor is thinnest. Despite Sheik's continuous effort to slice the enemy, the woman concludes that damage will still not be enough. Drawing the giant creature's attention on the battlefield, the MC provokes the beast to attack him from that side. Furious at the insolence, the huge serpent opens its jaws in a completely mortal advance. In an incredibly fast and precise jump, the boy dodges the strike, escaping over the monster. Landing right next to the captain's horse, he apologizes for the unforeseen event in a quite cynical way. Irritated by the low-class soldier's audacity, the warrior questions if that is some kind of test against her. Without wasting time, the commander prepares her own spear and orders the maid to take care of her mount. The beast returns to invest violently against the young warrior, who tries to move away quickly from the danger. Observing the tactical situation, Piri fires a devastating electrical strike from above with her weapon. The magical attack hits the monster head-on, causing massive damage directly to the armored scales. Confident with the gap created by his superior, Sheik thanks her for the valuable help in the middle of the confusion. Concentrating an explosive charge of golden energy into his blade, the hero warns that he will finish the job right there. With a ruthless movement, he slices the giant serpent's head from bottom to top in a single lethal cut. The creature's mutilated body collapses lifeless, staining the white snow with blood while the squadron watches from the background. Concerned for the master's safety, the little squire runs as fast as she can through the thick blizzard. Calm after the battle, the warrior confirms he is fine and praises the girl for having brought extra clothes since his coat was destroyed. Stowing her heavy weapon, the captain praises the rookie's ability, admitting that he is not just a suicidal pawn. Without losing his defiant pose, the boy notices the commander's ego and asks her to be honest and admit she was impressed. Ignoring the silly provocation, the woman mounts her horse again, warning that she will make the recruit work to the bone. Resuming the lead of the frigid march, she proudly utters the military motto of her powerful lineage. The MC lets out a mocking laugh and warns the leader not to complain when he steals all the glory from that mission. In a memory of his distant past, the sword saint lets out a long, heavy sigh in the freezing air. By his side, his beloved wife asks what he is trying to do standing like that in the middle of the snow. He turns his face immediately, becoming slightly confused by her unexpected questioning. Completely bundled up against the extreme weather, Hannah comments that her husband is acting in a very strange way. The warrior explains that he finds it very strange that his breath doesn't condense in that absurdly frozen environment. The woman responds affectionately that that is obvious, as they are at an altitude much higher than their own country's mountains. She complements the explanation by detailing that in very dry and cold environments, the air does not fog up with the same ease. Impressed by his companion's wisdom, Chrono praises her intelligence for having read about that specific subject. Playing with the situation, he deduces quickly that she got that information directly from the books in his office. As an expert focused only on combat, the hero decrees that he will leave theory to her, but Hannah retorts by stating that knowledge is also power. Trusting fully in her husband's strength, the young woman states that she counts on the absolute protection of the renowned sword saint. Back to the reality of the present, the squadron continues the relentless military march along the trail covered in thick snow. Walking in absolute silence, the boy maintains a serious countenance while carrying the luggage on his back. On horseback, the captain sets the troop's pace while the rookie and the maid follow, enduring the cruel weather conditions. The rest of the masked warriors follow the movement, ensuring the security of the entire perimeter of that frigid expedition. Noticing the heavy atmosphere of the environment, Belle breaks the tension by commenting that the location has suddenly become very quiet. The squire calls the hero's attention, trying to seek some confirmation about her negative intuition. Focused exclusively on the mission, the MC responds dryly that they are not on a stroll to make small talk. Even agreeing with the scolding, the girl confesses that the macabre calm gives the clear impression that time has simply stopped. She also notes that the cold has worsened drastically compared to the night before, and observes the constant smoke coming from her own mouth. Using simple logic, the warrior explains that the lack of sound occurs because the dense snow absorbs the surrounding noise. He details poetically that heat escapes easily to the clear sky, creating a wonderful scenario, but that it is nothing more than a mortal world. Following his deep reasoning, the young maid admits that all that white immensity hides a terrifying danger. Curious about the master's highly advanced vocabulary, she asks since when he has understood such complex things. The hero gets lost in his thoughts, remembering that his late wife was a true expert in this type of natural study. The bitter memory of the past hits the swordmaster head-on, causing his mind to stall for a brief instant. Hearing the whisper of an unknown female name, the maid asks quickly, but the boy avoids the question, changing the subject. Noticing the side conversation in the rear, the commander intrudes, offering to tell a dark story to the rookie. With an intimidating look turned backward, Piri asks if the girl has heard of an infamous clan of criminals in that region. Trembling slightly upon recognizing the name, the maid confirms she knows the fame of the ruthless organization that operates in the underworld of various nations. The captain confirms the dark rumors and reveals that those icy mountains are exactly the faction's main territory. She explains that the criminals are gathering forces from all bases and have certainly started to track the military group. In absolute panic at the gravity of the situation, the little maid recalls desperately that the gang specializes in human trafficking. Trying to calm the girl's hysterical mood, the warrior guarantees that the organization's target is not the people in the unit. Maintaining a calculating posture, the recruit only listens to his superior's tactical explanation without showing the slightest physical reaction. Giri reveals dramatically that the faction is searching for a legendary treasure hidden in a river in the region, the Great Sword of Chrono Gaius. Completely shocked to hear the mention of his former name, the MC freezes in place, trying to digest it all. The story points out that an identical blade, forged in the same molds as the Sword Saint's colossal weapon, ended up getting lost in those remote lands. With his heart racing from the blow, the boy tries to understand how a crucial piece of his former life ended up in a godforsaken place like that. Trying to pull from the bottom of her own memory, the squire babbles that this historic title doesn't sound entirely strange to her. The leader exults with arrogance that that was the name of the unfortunate warrior whom the powerful necromancer Gilgran subdued and murdered in the past. She continues to brag that the massacre promoted by the patriarch when defeating the supposed ancient heroes became an indisputable legend in society. Consumed by a tearing hatred upon hearing the lying glory of the man who destroyed his family, the hero fights hard to contain his own fury. Unaware of the soldier's mortal hatred, the woman analyzes the magnitude of the situation, considering the inestimable power that that mystical relic must carry. Exuding pure ambition in the middle of the extreme cold, Puri decrees that she will never let a band of dirty trash get their hands on the treasure before her. With his head down, the MC clenches his hand while the little maid asks if he is okay. On her horse, the captain comments that she would love to cross swords with this Chrono since she is unaware of his strength. With that, one of the warriors tells the girl the legend that the weapon awakens where the moonlight shines on the snow. He laments that they have been there for a year following only this absurd lead. Laughing, the soldier admits the story is weak and even bets that the treasure doesn't exist. Listening to it all in silence, the boy remains still, absorbing the information. He concludes mentally that a blade identical to his former, powerful sword really is around there. Reflecting on the last few days, the hero realizes that his current body controls mana very efficiently. However, he still lacks a vessel strong enough to support all his massive power contained within. Determined, Sheik promises himself that he won't let anyone steal his sacred weapon again. Suddenly, the military march stops abruptly on the frozen trail. Pulling the mount's reins, the commander notices something wrong on the path ahead. The MC also turns his attention to the side upon noticing the hostile movement. Confused, the maid and the bald warrior try to understand what made the group freeze in their tracks like that. In the middle of the strong icy storm, a solitary figure appears, blocking the expedition's path. Facing the distant shadow, the members of the squadron question the identity of the mysterious presence. Totally ironic, the captain states that speak of the devil and he shall appear. The assassin hides his face using a white mask equipped with dreadful horns. Scared by the subject's intimidating look, Bell shrinks back, thinking they've run into a wild monster. Acting quickly, the hero extends his protective arm and tells the girl to stay calm behind him. Observing the dramatic performance, the boy concludes aloud that that is the region's feared criminal clan. The leader of the bandits exudes threatening electrical energy while assessing the soldier's strength. Shortly after, several other members of the faction emerge slowly from the crevices of the storm. Gradually, more and more armed assassins reveal themselves, covering the trail's blind spots. Seeing the monumental size of the enemy army, the leader and the rookie realize the absurd gravity of the problem. The elite military squadron ends up being cornered by the immense forces of the mountain underworld. Preparing his own sword for combat, Sheik warns that the unit has lost its escape routes. Far from being frightened, Piri states that the criminals just saved the military the trouble of hunting them down. Taking the lead in the tactical situation, the MC mocks the ambush and asks who will be the first to get beaten. Immediately, the masked boss takes a firm step into the snow and accepts the challenge openly. Without backing down an inch, Sheik asks ironically if the big guy will do the honors of falling first. Standing arrogantly, The enemy warrior orders the cheeky brat to say his own name. The criminal leader maintains his hostile posture, waiting for an immediate answer from the intruder of that mountain. The rookie finds the whole formality pathetic and asks if that band of assassins wants to play honorable knights. Behind him, the commander tells the youth not to run from the fight, pulling a guarantee that the hero would never do such a thing. Facing the faction intensely, the boy announces in a loud, clear voice that his name is Sheik Proud. To mock his rival's attitude, the swordmaster turns the tables and orders the bandit to identify himself as well, pointing his blade lethally. The hero warns that he will spare the scum if they tell him everything about the hidden relic. Faced with the grave imminent threat in the boy's tone, the commander of the underworld opts for total silence. Instead of advancing, the masked warrior retreats a step, visibly intimidated by the crushing pressure. Irritated by the explicit cowardice, Sheik raves that he did not give the adversary permission to retreat like that. Quite serene with the conflict, Pari advises the recruit to save his breath against trash that flees from death. Exuding full confidence, the captain instructs the boy to watch the true carnage that is about to begin. She then drives the spear handle into the ice with absurd force, warning that the rest of the enemy army is already attacking. In total violent synchronization, the killers activate their weapons, firing blue sparks across the cold surface. Recovering his swagger, the criminal boss lets out a sadistic laugh, wrapped in the energetic and electrical aura of his equipment. Without warning, the clan's ranks advance relentlessly through the snow, wanting to annihilate the small intruder unit. Excited by the inevitable bloodshed, the hero notes coldly that the slaughter will be fun. Predicting absolute chaos, the bald soldier pushes Belle to the rear, forcing the girl to seek a safe hideout. Spinning her heavy golden spear, the commander recognizes the brutal desperation that motivates the rush of that sea of opponents. Full of killer instinct, she prophesies that the weaklings will sink into the ice and lets her subordinates off the leash. Motivated by the insane command, Gilgran's men scream, tearing their own vocal cords with so much rage. Exploding their mana reserves, Pari creates a crimson whirlwind that stains the entire horizon of the frigid region. Finally, the two front lines collide in a thunderous wave that breaks the mountain's structures. Amidst the uncontrolled tumult, a thug faces Sheik, focused on getting an easy trophy in direct combat. The MC notices the dangerous onslaught and praises the synchronization that proves the worth of that intermediate unit of evil. Controlling the rhythm of the savagery, the leader bellows from the bottom of her chest, ordering faster victories. Using deceptive lightness, the woman slashes through entire groups, spinning the steel of her polearm with lethal perfection. Further back, the bald veteran raises a huge metal shield to break the descending axe of a deranged criminal. Trying to hunt valuable targets, a treacherous archer curses the captain, arming an arrow aimed at her nape. Loving the chaos of war, Pari demands the wretch stop being a nuisance with cheap tricks. In a monstrous jump, she reaches the enemy rear, shattering the entire formation with concentrated destructive lightning. Stepping on the remains of the crushed armor, the warrior warns that irrational trash will never be able to truly bring her down. The remaining bandits retreat, swallowing hard, completely terrified of the aggressor's immeasurable speed. Eliminating enemies in close combat, Sheik recognizes that the girl displays magical control superior even to Greeka's. Proud of the ongoing massacre, the shield soldier idolizes the boss, repeating her honored nickname aloud. The entire squadron joins in the cheap bootlicking and celebrates the unattainable glory of the noble officer in tactical command. Satiating her own manic ego, the captain absorbs the praise and demands even louder screams to feed her warlike pleasure. Faced with that ridiculous display of narcissism, the sword hero wonders silently what is wrong with the woman. Interrupting the boy's small existential reflection, an opponent tries his luck with a direct strike but swallows a powerful knee to the gut. Noticing the newcomer rookie's tactical slowness, the military leader orders coldly for the boy to get his head out of the clouds. Full of superior arrogance, the warrior insinuates that the family's useless one will need to feel his own tail on fire to act decently. Exuding crushing pressure, the reincarnated warrior repudiates the silly threat and opens his guard, inviting the mortal assassins. In a fraction of a second imperceptible to normal eyes, the boy triggers a sea of pure flames that burns the beasts along the way. Shocked by the burning ocean melting the battlefield, Pari is left open-mouthed, noting that the inferior kid also forges magic. The column of lightning energy sweeps the battlefield, carbonizing the criminals on the spot. The brutal impact tosses the enemy's bodies through the air like ragdolls. In the middle of the destruction, the boy remains calm, wielding the blade bathed in pure golden flame. Observing the carnage from afar, the commander recognizes the surgical precision of the attack. Satisfied with the practical result, the hero comments that the technique is useful and he intends to adopt it into his arsenal. Right behind, the bald soldier praises the rookie, impressed that he copied the leader's move. Boiling with wounded pride, Puri grumbles that the kid replicated the strike after watching only once. Meanwhile, the band leader panics upon noticing that dozens of enemy reinforcements have just arrived. With that, the MC and the captain turn their faces simultaneously upon noticing the new threat approaching. In desperation, the shield veteran screams to retreat since the numerical disadvantage is now mortal. Displaying an arrogant posture, the woman mocks, asking if the recruit is afraid of the fight. Irritated by the useless provocation, Sheik retorts that the expedition's goal is not to annihilate the local faction. He argues that he needs to find the sword soon and that fighting there will only cause a pointless, friendly bloodbath. Ignoring the boy's tactical logic, the warrior focuses only on him, noting that the boy is hiding his true mana. Caught by surprise by his superior sharp intuition, the reincarnated one is left completely reactionless. Evaluating the situation coldly, the woman points out that that spell requires high-level magical control. She explains that not even the veterans master the skill, evidencing that the youth imitated the strike perfectly. Facing her subordinate, the captain questions if his body simply cannot support the brutal energy reserve he possesses. With no way to deny the accurate accusation, the sword hero maintains absolute silence. The conversation is interrupted by the enemy's scream announcing the attack, while the boy laments mentally having been discovered so quickly. Leaving the interrogation aside, Puri warns that she will rip the answers out of him as soon as the battle ends. Taking the front of the snowfield, the commander tells the rookie to just watch while she deals with the entire army alone. The reincarnated one is startled by the woman's madness and demands to know what she is about to do. As an answer, the warrior explodes her own aura, conjuring a frightening red storm. Aware of the danger, the veteran alerts that the boss has released the 5th layer of mana and will use the supreme technique. Feeling the dense wind tugging at his own body, Sheik tries to stop his superior's craziness by shouting. Terrified of the imminent massacre, the little maid calls for the immediate retreat of all allies in the region. Without listening to anyone, Puri raises her spear, channeling a devastating electrical charge into the tip of the weapon. Floating amidst the sparking chaos, she lets out a sadistic laugh, praising the beauty of her own destruction. Looking at the terrified worms down below, the madwoman decrees that cleaning the trash is easy when you destroy the entire area. A colossal lightning bolt falls from the skies, tearing through the atmosphere to prove the absolute sovereignty of military force. Faced with the monumental magic, the criminals freeze completely, swallowed by irremediable despair. Driven mad by her own power, the commander orders all the filthy insects to die at once. Disapproving of the woman's theatrical exaggeration, the MC feels the surface vibrate abnormally beneath his boots. Observing the cracks spreading quickly across the floor, he finally understands the gravity of the captain's mistake. It becomes clear that the structure of that frigid environment will not withstand the massive pressure of the electrical spell. Desperate, the boy yells for his superior to stop the attack, alerting her about the local foundation's critical state. But the warning comes too late, and the thunder spear hits the frozen crust with cataclysmic force. The brutal explosion sweeps the enemy ranks, incinerating the killers in the blink of an eye. Displaying a triumphant posture amidst the dust, Puri exalts the greatness of the proud lineage to which she belongs. The illusory celebration is short-lived when the ice breaks for good beneath the shocked warrior's feet. Foaming with rage at his colleague's stupidity, she curses the idiot, noting that the ground is going to collapse completely. Completely caught by surprise by basic physics, the woman loses her balance, falling backward into the void. A kilometer-long rift tears through the middle of the canyon, swallowing dozens of combatants on both sides of the war. Without anywhere to lean on, the squadron leader plummets humiliatingly off the edges of the fractured earth. Trying to hold on in vain, the boy panics, noting the colossal depth of that icy abyss. Up above, the squire and the soldier extend their arms, screaming uselessly for the leader swallowed by the snow. Cursing his own luck, the woman plummets into the abyss, accompanied by the yells of the unlucky recruit. The pair gain speed while gravity drags them mercilessly to the bottom of the dark canyon. Seeing the rocky walls fly by, the warrior curses angrily upon noticing the size of the fissure she created. The bald veteran approaches the edge, trembling and calling for the commander swallowed by the mountain's fault. White mist covers the vertiginous fall, hiding the final destination of all the wretches who fell. Evaluating the precarious situation, the subordinate points out that any rescue attempt would result in certain death. Distressed by the sudden loss of the master, the young maid stares into the black hole, completely desolate. During the freefall, the swordmaster asks with total disdain if the captain is mentally slow. He throws in her face that the collapse was obvious, but the commander tells him to shut his mouth, justifying that she was focused on the enemy massacre. shifting the focus of the blame. Puri accuses the rookie of having caused it all by copying the strike, while the boy retorts that she simply lost her composure. Trying to mask her nervousness, the leader denies having gotten carried away by a brat and demands to receive praise for the lethal display. The verbal clash is cut short abruptly when the warrior notices a drastic change in the environment below them. With the space widening considerably, the pair finally sees the massive bottom of that deep cavern. Analyzing the danger during the fast descent, the MC narrows his eyes, intrigued by a mysterious shimmer on the floor. Wielding the heavy polearm, Puri orders the recruit to get ready to cushion the fall if he doesn't want to turn into ice pudding. Cracking his neck confidently, Sheik guarantees that he wouldn't commit such an amateur mistake on a basic landing. Immediately, the two warriors channel their respective magical auras, wrapping their own bodies in dense layers of pure energy. Tearing through the cavern's cold air, the pair approaches the lethal impact as if they were true shining meteors. The simultaneous shock against the rocky floor generates a mana explosion that sweeps the abyss's darkness in a second. Using her own spear as a force dissipator, the commander lands in safety, scattering scarlet sparks. The swordmaster's resistance pierces the frozen soil, ensuring a firm arrival without a single scratch. Standing up calmly, the captain brushes dust off her clothing, commenting that the free fall lasted quite a while. Facing the reckless leader's back, the reincarnated one sighs, labeling the woman as a true brainless brute. Walking right behind, he judges the captain too out of control to be Helios's sister, receiving a harsh insult as a response. Analyzing the kilometer-long wall above them, Puri decrees that trying to climb back to the surface is madness. With the original escape route discarded, the warrior deduces that exploring the network of underground tunnels is the only logical option. Detesting teamwork, she proposes they separate along the mountain paths and agree to notify the other in case they find something useful. Accepting the tactical division against his will, Sheik asks the madwoman not to destroy everything again and questions what the warning signal will be. Without losing her pose, the commander taps her own rear and tells the recruit to follow the sound so he doesn't get lost in the cavern. Facing the scene with a blank stare, Sheik only agrees in silence. The pair advances with caution through the illuminated depths of that vast, frozen underground structure. With that, the boy stops in the middle of the path and notices the bizarre texture of the blue walls around them. To test the environment's resistance, he strikes his sword blade directly against the icy surface. The dry impact reveals extreme hardness, making the hero doubt if it is ice or a rock harder than obsidian. He notes that common steel wouldn't even make a scratch without the use of mana, and notices that winding river has no end. Right behind, Puri explains that the enemy clan's goal is the great sword of Chronogaius hidden there. Suddenly, an immense blade of bluish energy cuts through the air and descends straight toward the boy. Reacting on pure instinct, Sheik defends the mortal attack firmly and even praises the adversary's strength. A masked man emerges, wrapped in an aura, while the protagonist is surprised he didn't sense the approach. The invader snorts, praising the brat's resistance and demanding to know who he is. Unshaken, the reincarnated one recognizes the figure as the same mysterious guy from before. Giving a confident smile, the boy repeats that his name is Seek Broud. Upon hearing that surname, the Krujik warrior targets the boy with a look filled with mortal hatred. Overcome by fury, the enemy delivers a heavy lateral strike that cuts through the air, forcing the protagonist to retreat. Sliding across the ice to cushion the retreat, Sheik maintains a high guard without saying a single word. The masked man growls that the Proud family is the scum that stained his entire clan's honor. Full of mockery, the boy tells him to shut his mouth about honor, throwing in his face that the coward fled and left his allies to die. Bothered by the adversary's cutting coldness, the warrior grumbles that he hates that look. The reincarnated one focuses his scarlet eyes on the target, exuding a silent and overwhelming pressure. Pointing his shining sword, the man deduces that the Prouds are also looking for the sacred weapon, and demands to know all the information. Confused by the sudden accusation, the boy questions what the rival means by that. Thinking the kid is playing dumb, the invader screams that their revenge will be relentless and impossible to stop. He swears that his group will take the great sword to annihilate Gilgran and sweep that cursed lineage from the face of the earth. Exploding his blue mana, the Krujik prepares to fight while Sheik asks if he wants to settle it all right there. Upon processing the enemy's words, the protagonist concludes that the weapon seems to be the only way to kill the patriarch. The boy's mind boils at the thought that the artifact carries the sadistic necromancer's secret weakness. With this, the hero's motivation changes totally. He releases intense flames through his blade upon understanding the real value of that prize. Consumed by his own bloodlust, the reincarnated one warns that he will not hand over the sword for any reason, for the sake of his own revenge. In a simultaneous war cry, the two opponents fire against each other, seeking direct combat. The The blades collide in a brutal clash of auras that divides the scenery between golden energy and blue flames. The colossal force of the impact shatters the ice floor in the same instant, opening a large crater in the tunnel. Cornered by the weight of the attack, the masked man slides backward, trying to recover his footing. Taking advantage of the gap, the protagonist jumps with extreme violence and brings down a slash bathed in destructive power. The invader raises his own sword and locks the strike in a desperate block that generates a storm of sparks. Face to face, the two stare at each other closely, maintaining an unwavering killer instinct. Without retreating a millimeter, they trade a frenetic sequence of swift cuts that illuminates the dark cavern. Despite supporting the lethal rhythm well, the boy ends up being pushed a little backward by the adversary's onslaught. Impressed, the enemy realizes that the brat's refined technique surpasses that of the Krujiks themselves and brings back vivid memories. Intrigued by the absurd talent, the warrior refuses to believe in the improbable theory that just arose in his mind. Discarding his suspicions, the clan member swears he will rip the truth out by beating the kid. However, an immense crack tears through the ice floor quickly right between the two combatants. Frightened by the sudden tremor, the sword hero only hopes that the squadron leader didn't collapse the tunnel. To everyone's surprise, a colossal, three-headed magical beast emerges, breaking the surface with pure aggression. Sweating cold, the masked warrior notes that the creature is an ancient magical beast, totally shocked that they are down there. The boy notices the enemy's genuine astonishment and comments that he seems to know the location's threats very well. Without losing focus on survival, the reincarnated one calls the adversary's attention to propose a logical exit. With the monster roaring in the background, he suggests finishing the fight after killing the beast, to avoid the area collapsing on top of them. The colossal albino hydra displays its sharp fangs, howling with both heads open in an uncontrollable frenzy. Pondering the emergency alliance, the Krujik clan member remains silent, evaluating the risks. While the monster's huge bodies width the ice floor, the invader ends up yielding and accepts the offer against his will. However, he warns coldly that the protagonist will be his next target and tells him not to cry when the time of death arrives. Far from feeling any hint of fear, Sheik opens a somber and malicious smile, finding the cheap threat amusing. Agreeing to the lethal temporary pact, the two rivals fire together at full speed toward the gigantic beast.